My son called on a Wednesday, not our usual day. He sounded fine, but then he used a phrase we hadn't spoken in 25 years. "Dad, I just wanted to check the 18-inch rule one last time." My blood ran cold. That wasn't a question. It was our secret code for "I'm being watched, and I can't talk freely." He was sitting at his own kitchen table, but he wasn't alone. "The con has already begun. Thank you for being here with me." Before we begin, drop a quick comment. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect someone you love, yes or no? Your perspective might help someone else. Just so you know, this story includes some fictional elements to emphasize the lesson. What matters is the message behind it. I've seen that look before, the one where two people pretend they're strangers, while their bodies tell a different story. At 65, after 35 years investigating marital infidelity in Chicago before selling my PI firm 2 years ago, I should have been able to shut it off. The surveillance instinct, the pattern recognition, the automatic cataloging of micro-behaviors that separate truth from performance. I'd retired with enough money to be comfortable and enough cynicism to never fully relax, but tonight, sitting at my son's dinner table on a Friday evening in mid-August, I felt that old switch flip on without permission. Tanya Whitaker. My daughter-in-law smiled as she reached across the kitchen island toward Percy Holbrook. "Percy, could you pass the wine?" "Of course." He handed her the bottle without making eye contact. 18 inches, exactly. I watched them maintain that precise distance as they moved around each other in the kitchen. Her retrieving plates, him stepping aside with the wine opener. 18 inches. Not 20. Not 15. The kind of distance two people maintain when they've calibrated exactly how close they can stand without looking intimate. Natural strangers vary their proximity unconsciously. These two were performing normalcy. Tanya, 36, worked as a real estate marketing director, and every gesture carried that professional polish that made sincerity and deception indistinguishable. Percy, 42, had moved into the Lincoln Park neighborhood 3 months earlier and introduced himself as an independent financial advisor who'd relocated from Denver. He smiled easily. Too easily. "Dad, you're quiet tonight." My son Desmond looked at me from across the dining table. At 38, working as a fintech software engineer, he'd spent 2 decades carefully avoiding telling colleagues what I used to do for a living. The shame had created a distance between us, not 18 inches, but something measured in years of unspoken resentment. "She's just enjoying the meal," I said. Another lie in a house that suddenly felt full of them. Desmond smiled. "Percy's been really helpful with some financial advice. Thought it'd be good for you two to meet." "That's generous of you, Percy," I said. "Just being neighborly." His tone was warm, practiced, and when he said it just for half a second, Tanya's hand moved to her collarbone. A self-soothing gesture. Classic displacement behavior indicating emotional connection to the speaker. Her fingers touched the hollow of her throat with the kind of unconscious intimacy that takes months to develop. I looked down at my plate, heart rate climbing. Desmond was still talking. He helped us restructure some savings accounts. Really sharp with portfolio optimization. The wine bottle passed between them again. This time their eyes met. 2 seconds. 0.3 seconds too long. I'd timed 1,000 stolen glances in surveillance footage. 2 seconds is the threshold where polite acknowledgement becomes something intimate. They broke contact fast, but not fast enough. Do you know what the worst part was? Not seeing it. Knowing I might be seeing nothing at all. I've been retired 2 years. 2 years of trying to be a normal father, not an investigator who treats every human interaction like evidence. 2 years of Desmond slowly, carefully letting me back into his life after decades of calling my profession prying and invasive, and once during a college argument that never quite healed, The reason I can't trust anyone. What if I'd just forgotten how normal people interact? What if financial advisors and real estate directors just naturally touched their collarbones and maintained 18-inch boundaries and made 2-second eye contact? Because that's what friendly neighbors do. What if 35 years of cataloging betrayal had turned me into someone who couldn't recognize ordinary kindness anymore? The doubt was suffocating. And here's Grandpa Raymond, looking serious as always. Aurelia's voice cut through my spiral. My granddaughter, 10 years old, 5th grade, gap-toothed and brilliant, sat at the far end of the table with her iPad propped against the water pitcher. She aimed it at me like a camera. Thanksgiving practice dinner, August 15th. Aurelia, put that away during dinner, please, Desmond said with practiced parental exhaustion. But I'm making a family documentary. She continued recording anyway, panning across the table. This is my family eating pot roast. Note the serious expressions and adult conversation about boring money stuff. I smiled despite myself. She did this, constantly documented everything, narrated her life, like she was making films for future historians. Her innocence felt like a reprieve from the pattern recognition eating away at my certainty. But then Percy laughed at something Tanya said, and Tanya's hand moved to her collarbone again. Same gesture, same emotional tell. I pushed back from the table. Thanks for dinner, Desmond. I should get going. Already? He looked concerned. You okay, Dad? Just tired. Long week. The lie tasted like ash. I drove through Lincoln Park at night, with both hands gripping the wheel, replaying every micro-tell. The 18 inches, the eye contact, the collarbone touch, the way they moved around each other like dancers who'd memorized the choreography. My mind built the case automatically, surveillance dates, photography angles, phone record subpoenas, and then dismantled it just as fast with a single question: what if I'm wrong? My South Loop apartment was dark when I arrived. I stood at the door for 30 seconds before unlocking it, debating whether to let this go. Be a normal father. Stop seeing betrayal in every interaction. Let my son live his life without surveillance. I opened the door. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it that morning. Neat, efficient, empty. Bachelor minimalism. Helen's photo sat on the bookshelf beside the window. She'd been gone 4 years now. Cancer, fast and cruel. Before she died, she told me, "Don't let the job make you forget people aren't cases." I'd promised her I wouldn't. The notebook was exactly where I'd left it 2 years ago, untouched, waiting. Black leather, spiral-bound, the kind I'd used for 3 decades to document surveillance operations. The last entry was dated 2 years ago, a case I'd closed before selling the firm. Since then, nothing. Clean pages, retirement. I stood there holding it, my hand hovering over the first blank line. I could close it right now. Walk away. Let my son live without a father's paranoid surveillance. Let Desmond keep whatever happiness he'd built, even if it was built on something fragile. But the 18 inches, the eye contact, the collarbone touch, I might be wrong. God, I might be completely wrong. I opened the notebook, found a pen in the desk drawer. The pen touched paper. The pen touched paper. And my hand remembered what my mind had been trying to forget for 2 years. August 15th, 2024. The date came automatically, muscle memory bypassing conscious thought. Then I stopped, pen hovering over the next line because I didn't know what to call him. Subject too clinical. Target too aggressive. Percy Holbrook was my son's neighbor. Just a neighbor who'd moved in 3 months ago, who'd been helpful with financial advice, who smiled easily and maintained exactly 18 inches of distance from my daughter-in-law when they thought no one was paying attention. I wrote new neighbor, Percy Holbrook, 42, financial advisor, relocated from Denver. The format came back instantly: age, occupation, background. 2 years of retirement, and the structure was still there, waiting under the surface like scar tissue that never quite fades. My hand knew this language even when my brain questioned whether I should be speaking it. Next line. Initial observation. August 15th, 2024, 19:15 hours, subject's residence, Desmond's house, Lincoln Park. Then the details poured out. Distance control subject maintains exactly 18 inches when passing Tanya in kitchen. Precise calculated. Natural strangers vary proximity unconsciously, 14 to 24 inches typical range. This level of consistency indicates rehearsed behavior. Estimated practice period months, not weeks. Eye contact. Duration 2.0 seconds when speaking. Threshold between polite acknowledgement and intimacy is 1.7 seconds. Consistent overage by 0.3 seconds across 3 observed interactions. Both parties break contact simultaneously, synchronized disengagement indicating mutual awareness of boundary. Physical tells Tanya touches collarbone when subject speaks. Classic self-soothing gesture indicating emotional connection to speaker. Observed 3 times during 45-minute dinner. Unconscious automatic. Not performed when Desmond speaks. My pen moved faster now, decades of training taking over. The professional vocabulary returned unbidden intimacy markers, synchronization patterns, displacement behaviors. I was cataloging evidence the way I used to catalog adultery for divorce attorneys, building a case one micro-tell at a time. Breathing synchronization. When standing within 24 inches subject and Tanya's respiratory patterns align within 30 seconds. Indicates deep subconscious rapport. Timeline estimate for development, minimum 4 to 6 months of regular contact. I stopped writing, stared at the page. The observations were solid. Textbook. Any investigator with half my experience would read these notes and reach the same conclusion they were involved. Physically, emotionally, probably both. The evidence was clear, except, you know what they don't tell you about retirement? Your brain might let go, but your hands never do. My hand wrote intimacy markers, like it was 2019, and I was documenting another suburban affair for another betrayed spouse. But it was 2024, and I'd been out of the business for 2 years, and maybe, just maybe, I'd forgotten what normal people looked like. I turned to a new line and wrote counter-evidence, confirmation bias. 35 years of investigating infidelity creates pattern recognition that sees betrayal everywhere. Retired investigators often report difficulty distinguishing genuine suspicion from habitual suspicion. Am I seeing what's there or what I'm trained to see? Cultural shift. 2 years out of field. Social norms may have changed. Younger generation may maintain different proximity boundaries, eye contact durations, touch patterns than my investigative baseline assumes. Need to verify current behavioral norms. Sample size. Single observation 45 minutes. Insufficient data for definitive conclusion. One dinner is not a pattern. Could be coincidence, misinterpretation, or my own projection of professional paranoia onto innocent interactions. I was cross-examining my own case, poking holes in my own evidence. Because the alternative, accepting that my observations were accurate, meant accepting that my son's marriage was a lie, and I was about to spend weeks or months documenting its collapse. The desk lamp cast shadows across the page. My apartment was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and distant traffic on Congress Parkway. Helen's photo watched from the bookshelf. I wondered what she'd say about this. Probably something about giving Desmond the benefit of the doubt. About trusting that my son knew his own life better than I could observe it from the outside. But Helen had also trusted me when I said something felt wrong about the contractor we'd hired to renovate the kitchen in 2015. Turned out he was running an invoice fraud scheme across 6 neighborhoods. My instincts had saved us $3,000. My instincts had also made me follow Desmond to a college party when he was 19, because I'd thought he was acting suspicious. He wasn't doing drugs. He was meeting a girl he was too embarrassed to tell me about. He didn't speak to me for 6 months after that. Instincts cut both ways. I looked at the evidence column, then the counter-evidence column, then back at the evidence. Estimated timeline greater than or equal to 6 months. I stared at that line. 6 months minimum. That level of comfort, the synchronized breathing, the automatic distance control, the unconscious touching, didn't develop overnight. It took time, practice, intimacy. But I could be wrong. I added a question mark. Estimated timeline greater than or equal to 6 months. That tiny punctuation mark was supposed to preserve doubt, leave room for error, signal that this was hypothesis, not conclusion, just notes, observations, nothing committed, nothing final. I closed the notebook slowly. The leather felt the same. The ink looked the same. Only I had changed or tried to. The question mark was supposed to mean I could still walk away. Close the notebook, put it back on the shelf, never open it again. Forget the 18 inches. Forget the eye contact. Forget the collarbone touch. Be a normal father to a son who'd spent 20 years wishing I could stop investigating everything. But I knew better. 35 years as a private investigator had taught me one immutable truth. You don't write things down to forget them. You write them down to build on them. Documentation isn't observation, it's commitment. The moment you record evidence, you've decided to follow it wherever it leads. Even if it leads to your son's marriage, even if it destroys everything. The question mark was a fiction, a way to pretend I might still turn back. I'd already started. 2 weeks later, I would learn exactly where the evidence led, and it would be worse than an affair. I had exactly 3 seconds before Percy Holbrook walked past the car I was hiding behind and saw his neighbor's father crouched on the sidewalk like a stalker. 2 weeks had passed since I'd opened that notebook. 2 weeks of telling myself I was gathering context, building a complete picture, making sure before I destroyed my son's world. 2 weeks of surveillance that brought me here, pressed against a stranger's Volvo on North Dayton Street. Heart hammering against my ribs, watching Percy's shoes move closer. 6 feet away. 5. He was on his phone. Yeah, the paperwork should be ready by Friday. His voice passed overhead, casual, unhurried. 4 feet. 3. If he glanced down, this was over. Not just the investigation. Everything. Because how do you explain to your son that you've been following his wife for 2 weeks? How do you justify crouching behind cars in Lincoln Park, like some divorced husband hiring himself out for surveillance work he can't let go of? The worst part wasn't that he'd catch me investigating. The worst part was that he'd catch me being exactly what Desmond had spent 20 years wishing I wasn't, the invasive, paranoid father who couldn't stop treating people like suspects. Percy's shoes moved past. Kept walking. Turned the corner toward the coffee shop on Fullerton. I stayed crouched for another 30 seconds, breathing like I'd run a mile. It had started simple enough. Wednesday afternoon, late August. Desmond had texted me Tuesday night, Atlanta for 3 days, big client pitch. Wish me luck. I'd wished him luck. Then I'd parked outside his Lincoln Park house at 2:30 the next afternoon. Professional surveillance. Clinical observation. That's what I told myself. Tanya left at 2:47. I noted the time, automatically, decades of training taking over. She drove north on Halstead, turned on Fullerton, then cut over to North Dayton. I followed 3 cars back, standard tail distance, far enough to avoid detection, close enough to maintain visual. She parked outside a 3-story apartment building. Red brick, renovated, the kind of place young professionals with Denver money moved into when they relocated to Chicago. Percy's building. I'd looked up his address the week before. Tanya walked to the entrance and punched in the building code without hesitation. 5 digits muscle memory, no checking her phone for the number. She knew it by heart. That's when the professional detachment started failing. Because this wasn't some insurance fraud case or custody dispute. This was Tanya. The woman who'd married my son 6 years ago, who called me Dad at family dinners, who sent me photos of Aurelia's school projects. This was my daughter-in-law walking into another man's building like she'd done it 100 times before. I sat in my car for 90 minutes, took photos of the entrance, documented entry time, exit time observations. The notebook was filling up with timestamps and license plate numbers and all the clinical details that used to feel like facts. Now they felt like ammunition I was stockpiling to blow up my own family. Friday, she came back. 3:10 in the afternoon. Same building, same confident walk, same code punched without checking. This time she stayed 90 minutes. I parked in a different spot, standard protocol, vary your position, don't establish patterns, and tried to ignore the way my hands shook when I wrote meeting 2 in the notebook. Do you know what's worse than not knowing the truth? Knowing it and carrying it alone while the person you're trying to protect smiles at you from 300 miles away. Desmond texted Friday night. Deal's looking good. Atlanta's exhausting but worth it. Miss you guys. I stared at that text for 10 minutes. Miss you guys. Plural. Him and Tanya. The unified front of marriage. Except I'd just spent the afternoon documenting his wife's second visit to another man's apartment, while he was 3 states away closing deals. I typed back, proud of you, knock 'em dead. Another lie in a life that was starting to feel like it was made of them. Monday afternoon. 3rd surveillance. I told myself this was the last 1-3 data points pattern, confirmed time to stop. But I drove to North Dayton anyway, parked in yet another position, and waited. 2:52, Tanya's car turned onto the street. I watched her park, watched her walk to the building, watched her enter that code. 5 digits automatic, no hesitation. The familiarity of it made my chest tight. 3 times in 5 days, while Desmond was in Atlanta believing his marriage was solid, and his father was watering the plants. That's when it hit me. I wasn't gathering evidence anymore. I was building a case. Timestamps, patterns, photographic documentation. The kind of evidence that holds up in divorce court. The kind that destroys any possibility of reconciliation or explanation, or maybe I was wrong. I sat in the car with the notebook open on the passenger seat, pen in hand, trying to write meeting 3 and failing because my hand wouldn't stop shaking. What if I was wrong? What if there was some explanation, financial planning, real estate consultation, something innocent that looked suspicious because I'd spent 35 years learning to see suspicion everywhere? But no. Her body language. The building code memorization. The timing always mid-afternoon, always when Desmond was traveling, always 90 minutes. Patterns don't lie. Professional instincts don't fail this consistently. The affair was real, and knowing that being certain of it felt like holding a grenade with my son's name on it. I drove home as the sun set. Chicago traffic moved around me in the usual chaos, but I barely saw it. My phone buzzed at a red light. Desmond. Thanks for watering the plants while we're gone, Dad. I stared at that message. I hadn't watered anything. I'd been watching his wife. I typed, no problem. See you Friday. Him, dinner at 6. Can't wait to tell you about the Atlanta deal. It's going to change everything. I sat at that red light long after it turned green, reading, it's going to change everything, over and over until the car behind me honked. Back at my apartment, I parked but didn't get out. Just sat there with the notebook in my lap and 3 meetings documented and professional certainty that should have felt like victory, but instead felt like carrying a weight I couldn't put down and couldn't share. 3 meetings in 5 days. Pattern confirmed beyond any investigative doubt. But confirmation wasn't supposed to feel like this. It was supposed to make things clear. Instead, I had evidence that would destroy my son's marriage and no idea when or how to tell him. I had proof of betrayal and the crushing knowledge that once I spoke it out loud, there was no taking it back. The question wasn't whether to tell Desmond. The question was what else I needed to know first. The hard part wasn't knowing my daughter-in-law was having an affair. The hard part was sitting across from her at Sunday brunch, pretending I didn't. 4 days since Monday's surveillance. 4 days carrying evidence I couldn't share. And now, Sunday morning, early September, I stood on Desmond's doorstep with flowers like this was just another family meal. Desmond answered with a smile I hadn't seen in years. "Dad, come in. Atlanta was fantastic, closed the Meridian deal." I hugged him. "Proud of you, son." Tanya's making frittata. Aurelia's setting the table. He led me through to the dining room where sunlight poured through bay windows and everything looked exactly like a happy marriage. Tanya turned from the kitchen island, smiled warmly. "Raymond, so good to see you." "Coffee." She looked relaxed, confident. Hair in a casual ponytail, jeans and sweater, bare feet on hardwood. She looked like someone who'd spent Saturday night watching movies with her husband, not like someone who'd been at Percy's apartment 3 times last week. Or was that performance? "Coffee would be great," I said, studying her face. Tension around the eyes, none. Forced smile, no displacement behaviors. She moved naturally, no nervous gestures. She was either innocent or very good. Aurelia bounded in. "Grandpa, look, I made place cards." She held up construction paper with elaborate calligraphy. "This one's yours, see? I put a detective magnifying glass because you used to solve mysteries." "That's beautiful, sweetheart." Desmond laughed. "She's been asking about your old job. I told her you were basically Sherlock Holmes." More like Watson," I said. "Holmes got the interesting cases." We sat. Frittata, fresh fruit coffee, too hot to drink. Normal conversation, Desmond's promotion prospects, Aurelia's school, play the Cubs. I participated, laughed at appropriate moments. The whole time I was reading Tanya. Mid-brunch. She refilled my coffee, stood beside me, carafe in hand, and said casually, "Dad, you used to stalk people for a living, didn't you?" The word hit like a slap. Desmond's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Tanya, come on. Dad wasn't a stalker." But I caught something in her posture. Slight tension in her shoulders. Eyes watching my reaction too carefully. This wasn't casual curiosity. This was reconnaissance. She was testing whether the old PI was still operational. I kept my face neutral, laughed. Followed cheating spouses, actually. Real glamorous work. Sat in cars, eating cold pizza, photographing people at their worst. Not exactly James Bond. Tanya laughed, light and easy. Sounds tedious. Tedious is the right word. Hours of nothing followed by 30 seconds of someone sneaking into a hotel. I sipped coffee. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious about your past," she said, returning to her seat. Desmond never talks about it, because Desmond had spent 20 years being ashamed. Because my son used to introduce me as in private security, rather than admit his father investigated infidelity. Because stalking was exactly how he'd described my work during that college argument that fractured something between us. Desmond shifted uncomfortably. "Can we not talk about this?" "Please." "Sorry, honey," Tanya said, smile still in place. "I'm just curious about Raymond's past." But her smile didn't reach her eyes, and she held eye contact with me for 1.2 seconds too long. I'd timed 1,000 guilty stares. That extra fraction where someone is reading you instead of just looking. You want to know what 35 years as a I teaches you how to spot when someone is doing exactly what you're doing watching. The conversation moved on. Aurelia's play, She Was a Tree, in the fall production. Desmond's new security project. Navy Pier next weekend. I participated, nodded, laughed. But my mind replayed Tanya's question on loop. You used to stalk people for a living, didn't you? Not investigate, not follow, not work as a private investigator. Stalk. That word choice wasn't accidental. She'd used the most invasive, most shameful term, testing whether I'd bristle, whether I'd defend myself too strongly, whether I'd show any sign that I was currently doing exactly what she'd accused me of. And the timing. 1 week after I'd started surveillance. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe she'd noticed something? A car parked too long on North Dayton. A reflection. The feeling of being watched that people develop when they're living double lives. I left after brunch with hugs and promises for next weekend. Drove back to South Loop with my hands too tight on the wheel. Back in my apartment, I opened the notebook to a fresh page. September 8th. Sunday brunch. T-probed re-surveillance capabilities. Word choice stalk, not investigate. Delivered as casual question but observed reaction carefully. Timing 1 week post-surveillance initiation. Conclusion. Either naturally paranoid about discovery or aware of specific surveillance threat. Recommend increased caution. Possible counter-surveillance awareness. I stared at what I'd written. She'd used the word stalk, not investigate, not follow. Stalk. That word was a weapon aimed directly at the intersection of my profession and my son's shame about it. She'd known it would make Desmond uncomfortable. She'd known it would test whether I was still sensitive about my work, which meant she was thinking about who might be watching, which meant this wasn't just affair management. This was counter-surveillance. I closed the notebook slowly. The game had changed. Before today, I'd been an invisible observer documenting evidence. Now maybe I was a known threat being actively monitored. If Tanya suspected surveillance, she'd be more careful. Different routes, varied timing, checking for tails. And if I wasn't careful, she'd catch me. And if she caught me, she'd tell Desmond his paranoid father was following her around Chicago like some obsessed stalker who couldn't retire. And Desmond would believe her, because that's exactly what he'd always feared I was. I sat at my desk as afternoon light faded. I needed help. Someone with access to records I couldn't get alone. Someone who could tell me who Percy Holbrook really was, and whether this was just an affair or something bigger. I needed someone I could trust. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a name I hadn't called in 6 months, Alvin Barton. I hadn't asked Alvin Barton for a favor in 6 years, and the last time I did, it cost him a weekend and saved a client's life. Tuesday morning, I walked through security at the FBI Chicago field office in the West Loop. Visitor badge clipped to my shirt elevator to the 4th floor sterile hallway. The door at the end said, Financial Crimes Consulting. Alvin was waiting in a small conference room. 68 years old, retired from Chicago PD as inspector 3 years earlier, but still kept a desk here as a white-collar crimes consultant. 40 years of friendship visible in the way he stood when I entered. No handshake, no small talk, just immediate recognition that something was wrong. Raymond? He gestured to a chair. 6 years since you walked in here. Must be serious. I sat. I need a background check. Complete workup. Percy Holbrook moved to Lincoln Park 3 months ago from Denver. Says he's a financial advisor. Alvin wrote the name. You sure once I run it there's a record? Federal queries get logged. I'm sure. He studied my face the way cops study suspects. What's this about? I exhaled. It's my daughter-in-law and the neighbor. I've documented 3 meetings while my son was traveling. Mid-afternoon, 90 minutes each. Same building, same pattern. I need to know who this guy is before I tell Desmond his marriage is falling apart. Alvin set the pen down. Jesus, Raymond. You're investigating your own family. I'm trying to protect my son. If I say your wife's cheating without knowing who she's with, I could make it worse. What if he's dangerous, running a con I need to know? The vulnerability of saying it out loud felt like exposing a wound. This wasn't some fraud case. This was my family. Alvin picked up the pen. Percy Holbrook, Lincoln Park. Let's see what we've got. He turned to the computer logged into databases I'd lost access to when I sold my firm. NCIC state records. Credit history. He typed, waited, frowned. Percy Holbrook, Lincoln Park. Driver's license issued 2023 Illinois. Before that. Before that, what? Before that, nothing. No credit history, no tax returns, no property records. Social Security number is valid, but shows minimal activity before 18 months ago. Alvin leaned closer. This guy didn't exist before 2023. My chest tightened. Witness protection, or alias. Alvin's jaw set. Let me try something else. You know how you can tell when someone's identity is fake when it's too clean? No parking tickets, no credit card debt, no past at all. Real people accumulate history like sediment layer after layer of mundane interactions. When someone has none of that, they're either very careful or very new. Alvin navigated to DMV facial recognition. If he's using a new identity, the face stays the same. Just need to find the old name. The screen loaded. 3 matches. Second one, facial recognition confidence 92%. Same face. Different name. Percy Reyes, age 42. Last known address, Denver, Colorado, 2016. Alvin clicked into the full record. Marriage license, Denver County, 2014. Percy Reyes to Tanya Caldwell. Divorce decree, Denver County, 2016. Percy Reyes and Tanya Caldwell Reyes. Alvin turned to look at me. Caldwell, that's her maiden name, I said. My voice sounded distant. Tanya's maiden name is Caldwell. Alvin read the screen again. Your daughter-in-law was married before, and her ex-husband is now your son's neighbor under a fake name. I couldn't answer. My brain was reframing everything. Desmond married Tanya in 2018. He'd met her at a real estate conference whirlwind romance engagement in 6 months. She'd never mentioned a prior marriage, never mentioned Denver, never mentioned Percy Reyes. And Percy Reyes now, Percy Holbrook, had moved to Lincoln Park 3 months ago. 3 streets from his ex-wife's new family. Created a new identity. Positioned himself as helpful neighbor, financial advisor, someone you trust with portfolio advice. This isn't an affair, Alvin said quietly. This is a plan. I stared at the screen. Marriage, 2014. Divorce, 2016. 2 years they'd been married. And then she moved to Chicago, met Desmond, married him without disclosing her past. 4 years later, Percy follows with a fake identity. Why? I said. Why the fake name? Why move here? Why now? Alvin pulled up additional records. Let me check financial history, he typed. I sat frozen, watching data scroll past. Tanya Caldwell married Percy Reyes in 2014. Desmond married Tanya Whitaker in 2018. My son didn't even know there was a first husband. We're Raymond, Alvin said, pointing at the screen. Divorce decree mentions contested property settlement. She claimed he'd hidden assets. He claimed she'd committed financial fraud during the marriage. Both accusations dismissed for insufficient evidence. There's a pattern here. What pattern? Ex-spouses with unresolved financial disputes don't coordinate secret meetings years later unless they're planning something that requires both of them. And they definitely don't create fake identities to do it. I leaned back. 3 meetings, exact timing, coordinated schedules. This wasn't rekindled romance. This was business. What are they planning to take? I said. Alvin printed the records: marriage certificate, divorce decree, facial recognition match. Slid the pages across. That's what you need to figure out, he said, before they take it. I drove back to South Loop with the printout on the passenger seat. Percy Holbrook didn't exist. Percy Reyes did. Married to Tanya for 2 years, divorced under contested circumstances, now living 3 streets away under false identity while meeting with her in secret. This wasn't an affair. It was something planned, something coordinated, something that required fake identity and months of positioning. The question wasn't what Tanya and Percy were doing. The question was what they were planning to take. 8 weeks, that's how long Alvin said we needed to build an airtight case. And that's how long I had to watch my son smile at the woman planning to destroy him while I carried the truth alone. Alvin Barton sat across from me in my South Loop apartment. That Monday evening, documents spread on the coffee table between us. Percy's marriage certificate, divorce decree, facial recognition match, timeline of moves from Denver to Chicago. Everything that proved Percy Holbrook was a lie and Percy Reyes was targeting my family. Sort of 8 weeks minimum, Alvin said, tapping the papers. We need documented financial conspiracy, not just photos of them meeting. Wire fraud charges require proof of interstate scheme, intent to defraud, and communication about the crime. That takes time to build. My 8 weeks of lying to my son's face, I said. 8 weeks of Sunday dinners pretending I don't know his wife is planning something with her ex-husband. 8 weeks of building a case that saves him from losing everything, Alvin countered. That's what you're doing. Rush this, we get weak evidence. Desmond won't believe you, Tanya walks away clean, and you lose your son anyway. But if we do this right, document everything, build the pattern, we get federal charges that stick. I knew he was right. The realization just felt like accepting a prison sentence. 56 days, 8 Sunday dinners, 8 Tuesday phone calls where Desmond would ask how I was doing, and I'd lie through my teeth. I was becoming exactly what my son had always feared. I was the invasive father who couldn't stop investigating, who treated family like suspects. Except this time I was right. And being right might cost me everything anyway. What do we need? I asked. Alvin pulled out a legal pad, started writing. Financial records showing money movement. Documentation of coordination between Tanya and Percy. Evidence of false identity used in fraud scheme. And proof of what they're targeting. My assets, I said. The house equity company sale proceeds savings. $740,000 total. That's what I've been building to leave Desmond. That's what they're after, Alvin said. We prove intent to steal those assets through coordinated scheme. We get wire fraud charges, federal case, real consequences. He outlined the strategy. I'd handle strategic planning. Alvin would monitor financial databases for LLC activity and suspicious transfers. We'd need audio recordings if possible. Wire fraud statute requires communication evidence. Everything had to be legally admissible or prosecutors wouldn't touch it. One more thing, Alvin said. You need external surveillance backup. You're too personally involved. Surveillance conducted by family member gets murkier in court. We need someone clean. I thought for 30 seconds, then picked up my phone. Marcus Drummond answered on the second ring. 63 years old, had worked financial fraud cases alongside me in the 90s before retiring to selective consulting. The kind of PI who asked no questions beyond tactical details and delivered evidence that held up in court. Marcus, I need surveillance assistance. 8-week job, family situation, everything legal and admissible. Family situation. His voice was carefully neutral. Say no more. When do we start? Tomorrow. I'll bring the equipment. Standard rates, chain of custody protocols, federal evidence standards. You coordinate strategy, I handle fieldwork. Appreciate it. I hung up. Alvin nodded approval. Good. External contractor means cleaner evidence chain. You stay in strategic role, maintain distance that keeps it legal. But we both knew I wasn't maintaining distance. I was planning to watch my son's life unravel in slow motion for 2 months, while pretending everything was fine. Do you know what the worst part was? Not the investigation. It was knowing I had 8 weeks to either save my son or lose him forever, and I couldn't tell him anything. Alvin left around 9. I sat alone in the apartment, staring at the calendar I'd marked on the wall. 8 weeks until Thanksgiving. Each Sunday circled in red family dinners where I'd sit across from Tanya knowing what she and Percy were planning. Each Tuesday marked Desmond's usual call to check on me to tell me about work projects and Aurelia's school activities and the normal rhythms of life that were about to detonate. 8 times watching him talk about future plans built on lies. 8 times smiling and nodding and saying nothing. What if he found out I knew and said nothing? What if the silence destroyed us more than the truth? What if waiting to tell him meant he'd never forgive the delay? But without proof, he'd never believe me. I'd be the paranoid father accusing his wife based on suspicion and old investigative instincts. He'd defend her, cut me off. And 3 months later, when the conspiracy succeeded, he'd lose everything anyway, with no relationship left to rebuild. I had to do this. I had to carry this. I walked to my desk, opened the investigation notebook. 9/16. 8-week operation begins. Target financial conspiracy evidence. Duration 56 days until confrontation. Asset protection $740,000. House equity company proceeds savings. Cost watching Desmond trust people planning to destroy him while carrying knowledge alone. I stared at what I'd written. Tomorrow Marcus would start surveillance. Tomorrow I'd coordinate with Alvin on financial monitoring. Tomorrow the professional investigation machinery would activate. But tonight was the last night I wasn't actively lying to my son for his own good. Tomorrow I'd become the father Desmond had spent 20 years wishing I wasn't. The one who invades, who spies, who can't trust people at face value. The one who treats family dinners like crime scenes and Sunday brunches like surveillance operations. Except this time I was right, and being right might be worse. Because if he ever discovered I'd known for 8 weeks and said nothing, watched him plan vacations with Tanya, discuss Aurelia's college fund, talk about growing old together while I documented evidence of her conspiracy with her ex-husband, he'd never forgive that silence. I closed the notebook and sat in darkness. Calendar on the wall showed 8 weeks marked in red. 56 days until Thanksgiving, until confrontation, until I'd have to tell Desmond everything. But first, 56 days of watching my son smile at family dinners. 56 days of pretending ignorance. 56 days of carrying knowledge so heavy I could barely breathe. The investigation started tomorrow. The lying started tonight. My son was holding my investigation notebook when I walked back into his living room, and the look on his face told me I'd just become everything he'd feared I was. 3 weeks into the surveillance. 3 weeks of Sunday dinners carrying the weight of Percy Reyes and Tanya's conspiracy. 3 weeks of lying through family meals and phone calls. And now, late September Sunday evening, I'd gotten careless. I'd stepped outside to take Marcus's call about new surveillance findings, left the leather notebook on Desmond's coffee table. Exhaustion does. That makes you forget the basics, makes you sloppy. When I walked back in, Desmond was sitting on the couch with it open in his hands. His face moved through stages, confusion, then recognition, then something worse than anger. Understanding. Dad. His voice was flat. What is this? I froze in the doorway. Desmond, 9/16. 8-week operation begins. Surveillance. He read my handwriting like it was evidence at a trial. 9/24. T and P met twice this week. Duration 90 minutes each. Who are T and P, Dad? My mouth opened. Nothing came out. He flipped through pages. Dates. locations, abbreviated observations. Professional format I'd used for 35 years. The same clinical language, the same invasion of privacy documentation he'd accidentally seen as a teenager when he'd found an old case file in my home office. He looked up at me. "You're doing it again. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think." He set the notebook on the coffee table like it was contaminated. "This is surveillance logs, professional format. You're investigating someone." "I can explain. You're retired, Dad. You're supposed to be done with this." His voice carried 20 years of accumulated disappointment. "You promised when you sold the firm. No more cases, no more following people, no more treating everyone like they're lying." I stood there watching my son see me the way he'd always feared I was. Not as father who protected, as investigator who invaded. The pattern he'd spent his whole adult life trying to escape was right there in black leather documented proof that I hadn't changed. "Can't you just stop?" Desmond said quietly. "Can't you trust people to live without being watched?" That's when he said it. The word. "Dad, you don't need to pry into anyone's business anymore." Pry. Not investigate, not help, not protect. Pry. That word. 20 years I'd carried it. 20 years, Desmond had been ashamed to say what his father did for a living. When kids at school asked, he'd say, "private security." When college friends asked, he'd say, "consultant." Anything but private investigator. Anything to avoid explaining that his dad followed cheating spouses and documented their worst moments and got paid to prove people were exactly as bad as their partners suspected. The word pry held all of that. Every parent-teacher conference where other dads talked about being accountants or engineers while Desmond stayed silent. Every time someone asked about my work and Desmond changed the subject. Every argument we'd had about boundaries and trust and why I couldn't just believe people were telling the truth. Pry. The most invasive, shameful word for what I'd done, and now he was using it. Again. "I thought retirement meant you'd finally let people live without surveillance," Desmond continued. "But you can't, can you? This is who you are. Someone who watches. Someone who doesn't trust." I opened my mouth. The truth was right there. It's Tanya. It's Percy. They're planning to destroy you. I'm trying to save you. But the words wouldn't come, because if I told him now, 3 weeks into 8-week evidence timeline, everything collapsed. He'd either confront Tanya and blow the investigation before we had solid proof, or worse, he wouldn't believe me. He'd side with his wife against his paranoid father, who'd just proven he still saw the world through surveillance lenses. 5 more weeks. I needed 5 more weeks to get evidence strong enough that he couldn't deny it. So I stayed silent. "Well," Desmond's voice got harder. "Are you going to tell me what this is, or is it another thing you can't talk about? In my head, I'm investigating your wife. She was married to Percy before you. He's using a fake identity. They're meeting while you travel. They're planning to take everything, the assets I've built, the future I wanted to leave you. I can save you if you just trust me for 5 more weeks." Out loud. "I can't explain right now." Desmond's face closed down. "Can't explain or won't explain, because those are different things. I will explain. Just not yet. Please trust me." Trust. He picked up the notebook, held it out to me. That's rich, coming from someone who keeps surveillance logs on people. Trust requires believing someone without needing documentation, Dad. But you've never been able to do that, have you? I took the notebook. The leather felt like it weighed 50 pounds. "Maybe you should go," Desmond said quietly. Those 4 words hit harder than any argument. He asked me to leave. My son, who'd never said that in 38 years, asked me to leave his house. "Desmond, I need some space, please." I walked to the door. Turned back. He was sitting on the couch, staring at where the notebook had been, like he could still see its contamination on his coffee table. "I'm trying to protect you," I said. He looked up. "From what? From living my life without being watched, because that's what it feels like, Dad. Like you can't stand that I might be happy without your surveillance keeping tabs on everything." I left, sat in my car outside his house for 10 minutes, notebook on passenger seat like evidence of my own failure. 3 weeks ago, I'd been carrying one impossible weight, knowing Tanya and Percy were conspiring to destroy Desmond. Now I carried two, that knowledge and my son's certainty that I was the problem. 5 weeks until I could explain. 5 weeks until I could prove why the silence was necessary. 5 weeks of Desmond trusting Tanya more because he trusted his father less. The irony was crushing. I was destroying our relationship to save him from destruction. But from his perspective, the invasive father he'd always feared just proved he'd never changed. And maybe he was right. Maybe surveillance does corrupt you. Maybe 35 years of documenting betrayal makes it impossible to see ordinary life without suspicion. Except I wasn't wrong. Percy was real. The conspiracy was real. The danger to my son was real. I just couldn't prove it yet. I started the car and drove home carrying double weight. Now the conspiracy I was investigating and the rift I'd just made wider by refusing to explain why. 3 years ago, I warned a man his wife was stealing from him, and he looked at me the same way my son just had, like I was the problem. I drove back to my South Loop apartment with Desmond's words looping in my head. Can't explain or won't explain. The disappointment in his voice. The shame in mine. 5 weeks until I could tell him why I'd been carrying that notebook. 5 weeks of him thinking I'd proven everything he'd feared about his invasive father. I sat in the dark living room, notebook still in my hand. Replayed his face the moment recognition hit, the way pry came out like an accusation, the resignation when he'd asked me to leave. First time in 38 years, my son had told me to go. What if 5 weeks was too long? What if the rift became permanent before I could explain? What if I gathered all the evidence in the world and Desmond still chose not to believe it? My mind pulled me backward to a memory I'd tried to suppress for 3 years. October 2021. My old PI office on Milwaukee Avenue 1 week before I sold the company. Client sitting across from my desk, Thomas Brennan, 52, owned a small manufacturing business on the South Side. Married 19 years. He'd hired me 4 weeks earlier to investigate his wife Margaret money disappearing from accounts, strange phone calls, elaborate explanations that never quite added up. I'd spent a month documenting everything. Margaret and her sister Susan moving business funds through shell accounts. Small transfers at first, then larger. 2 years of systematic theft. Total $340,000. I spread the evidence on my desk. Bank records, transfer receipts, recorded phone conversations, everything documented, time-stamped, irrefutable. "Mr. Brennan," I said, "I have documentation. Your wife has transferred $340,000 through these accounts over the past 2 years. Her sister is coordinating. It's embezzlement." He stared at the papers, picked up a bank statement, set it down. Looked at me with something between confusion and anger. "You're wrong," he said. "Margaret wouldn't. She doesn't even handle the books. That's why you didn't notice. She's been doing it in small increments disguised as vendor payments. Look at these transactions." I pushed the evidence closer. He didn't touch it. "You're trying to destroy my marriage," he said quietly. "I don't know what kind of investigator you are, but I won't pay for lies." "Mr. Brennan, this is fabricated. All of it." He stood. "I trusted you to help me not ruin everything." He walked out. I tried calling for 3 days. No response. Left voicemails explaining that the evidence was solid, that he needed to freeze the accounts immediately, that every day of delay meant more money disappearing. Nothing. You know what's worse than being wrong, being right, and having no one believe you until it's too late to matter. 2 months later, December 2021, I read an article in the Tribune business section. Small manufacturing company bankruptcy. Owner Thomas Brennan lost business home retirement savings. Wife Margaret Brennan and sister Susan Moore charged with embezzlement and wire fraud. Total amount stolen $480,000. I'd caught them at $340,000. If Brennan had believed me in October, he could have frozen accounts, contacted authorities, preserved most of his assets. Instead, denial continued theft, 2 more months of transfers, total financial collapse. The article included a quote from the prosecutor. If the victim had acted on earlier warnings, significant assets could have been recovered. Unfortunately, by the time he contacted authorities, the funds had been dispersed internationally. Earlier warnings. That's what they called my investigation. A warning that went unheeded. I'd sat in this same apartment reading that article, feeling the weight of professional failure despite being right. Thomas Brennan had looked at irrefutable evidence and called it lies, chose to believe his wife over documentation, and that choice had destroyed him. 2 months. That's how long denial lasted before reality crushed it. The memory released me back to the present. I sat in the same dark apartment where I'd read that Tribune article 3 years ago. Same chair. Same helpless feeling. Same question, what if being right doesn't matter? When the person you're trying to save won't listen. The parallel was exact. Thomas Brennan looked at me the way Desmond just had, like I was the enemy, like my evidence was the problem instead of the solution. Like believing me would hurt worse than ignoring me. But the stakes were different now. Brennan was a client. Desmond was my son. Thomas Brennan lost everything. 2 months after walking out of my office, $480,000. His business, his home, his retirement, all of it. Because he chose belief over evidence. Because I'd given him truth and he'd called it invasion. Because warnings without overwhelming proof are just accusations people can dismiss. I couldn't let that happen to Desmond. The difference was time. I'd given Brennan all the evidence at once and expected him to accept it. He'd rejected it because accepting meant his marriage was a lie, his wife was a criminal, his entire life needed demolition. That's too much to accept at once. So he didn't. This time with Desmond, I had 5 weeks. 5 weeks to build not just evidence of affair, but proof of conspiracy, so comprehensive, so undeniable, so overwhelming that belief wouldn't be optional, it would be inevitable. Brennan taught me the lesson 3 years too late for him. But just in time for Desmond, proof has to be so strong that denial becomes impossible. Not photos of meetings, not theories about Percy's fake identity, but financial documentation, criminal intent, coordinated theft evidence that eliminates any interpretation except truth. I opened the notebook to a fresh page. September 29th, Confrontation with Desmond. He found notebook, called it prying. Same word, same look Brennan gave me in 2021. But this time I keep going. 5 weeks remain. We'll gather proof so undeniable that belief is mandatory, not optional. Brennan taught me warning without proof is just accusation. This time proof, first warning after. Even if Desmond never forgives investigation, he'll be alive to not forgive me. I stared at what I'd written. Better Desmond hate me and survive than trust me and lose everything. Brennan had refused to believe evidence when I showed it to him, gently, incrementally, with room for doubt. This time I'd make doubt impossible. I'd gather financial records, LLC documentation, criminal conspiracy proof, everything that made denial not just wrong, but absurd. 5 weeks. This time I wouldn't ask Desmond to believe me. I'd make belief irrelevant. 5 weeks of surveillance had given me everything I needed to prove Tanya was having an affair, and my hand was shaking over the phone because I'd just realized that wasn't enough. The evidence was spread across my dining table like a prosecutor's case file. 37 photographs of Tanya entering Percy's apartment building on North Dayton. 17 videos showing visit durations average 87 minutes, never less than 60, never more than 2 hours. GPS tracking data showing pattern meetings every 3 to 4 days exclusively when Desmond traveled for work. Timestamps, locations, frequencies, everything documented with professional precision. By any investigative standard, the affair was proven beyond doubt. Case closed. Except my hand was shaking. I picked up my phone. Desmond's contact stared back at me. One call. That's all it would take. Send the photos, explain Percy's real identity, Percy Reyes, ex-husband, fake name, coordinated meetings. Show the evidence. Let Desmond confront Tanya. 5 weeks of carrying this alone could end tonight. My finger hovered over the dial button. 5 weeks. 35 days of watching my son trust someone destroying him. 35 days of Sunday dinners sitting across from Tanya while she smiled and asked about my back and served pot roast like she wasn't meeting her ex-husband twice a week. 35 days of isolation so crushing, I'd stopped sleeping through the night. One call, it could be over. But then Alvin's voice in my head. Wire fraud requires financial conspiracy proof. We need more than a affair. I set the phone down. 37 visits. 17 documented. Average duration, 87 minutes. What were they discussing for an hour and a half? Not just affair logistics. Not just stolen moments. Planning something. I looked at the photos again. Tanya entering Percy's building. Same confident walk. Same lack of furtiveness. She wasn't sneaking. She was conducting business. The realization hit like cold water. What if I called Desmond right now, showed him the affair evidence, he'd confront Tanya? She'd admit it or deny it, doesn't matter. Either way, divorce proceedings begin. Standard property split. Child custody battle. Emotional devastation. Family destroyed. But what if that was always the plan? What if the affair wasn't betrayal, it was mechanism? What if divorce on Tanya's terms was the goal and romantic relationship with Percy was just the trigger to get there? I thought about Margaret Brennan, Thomas's wife, the one who'd embezzled while using affair rumors as distraction. The affair had been real but secondary. The theft was primary. And by the time Thomas understood that the money was gone, same pattern, Delaware LLC. Percy's fake identity. 8 months of careful positioning, moving to Lincoln Park, befriending Desmond, offering financial advice. That wasn't passionate romance. That was infrastructure. Exposing the affair now might trigger the trap before I understood what the trap was. Do you know what the worst part was? Not the investigation hours. Not the surveillance. It was sitting at Desmond's table last Sunday, watching Tanya serve dinner, seeing my granddaughter hug her, and knowing what she was, knowing what Percy was. Carrying that knowledge alone, while Aurelia showed me her math homework, and Desmond talked about his promotion prospects, and Tanya laughed at jokes and touched Desmond's hand across the table like she loved him. The isolation was torture. Last Sunday, Tanya had asked me how my back was feeling. She'd noticed I'd been moving stiffly, surveillance hours in cars, stress manifesting physically. She'd suggested a chiropractor, gave me a referral card, smiled with what looked like genuine concern. I'd thanked her, sat through dinner, drove home, stood in my apartment staring at that referral card for 20 minutes, wondering how someone who was planning to destroy my son could simultaneously care about my back pain. Maybe she didn't see it as destruction. Maybe in her mind, whatever she and Percy were planning was justified, rationalized. Maybe she'd convinced herself Desmond deserved it, or that love with Percy was worth the cost, or that the money was rightfully hers somehow. Didn't matter. The result was the same. I looked at the calendar on my wall. Original plan, 8 weeks until Thanksgiving confrontation. We were at week 5. 3 weeks remained. Except now I knew 3 weeks wasn't enough. I needed financial conspiracy evidence, not just affair proof. Actual documentation of whatever scheme required Delaware LLC and fake identity, and 8 months of careful positioning. That meant more weeks. Probably many more. More Sunday dinners, more Tuesday phone calls where Desmond asked if I was okay, and I lied. More watching my son plan his future with someone planning to erase that future. More pretending. More isolation. More torture. I boxed up 5 weeks of evidence, labeled it Phase 1, opened a folder called Phase 2. More weeks alone. More dinners pretending. More torture. The choice wasn't really a choice. Show Desmond affair evidence, now destroy family immediately while missing financial scheme. Or continue investigation, find complete truth, destroy family later, but save assets. Brennan's wife had stolen everything because Brennan acted on partial information. Confronted her about affair, missed embezzlement, lost it all. I wouldn't make that mistake. I opened the notebook to a fresh page. October 15th. Week 5 complete. Affair conclusively proven, 37 visits, 17 documented pattern established. Assessment insufficient. Affair appears to be mechanism for larger scheme, not primary objective. Evidence suggests financial conspiracy utilizing divorce as vehicle. Phase 2. Objective, identify financial target, document conspiracy, build case for wire fraud charges. Timeline indefinite. Cost, continued isolation, extended family deception, psychological toll mounting. I stared at what I'd written. Indefinite timeline. Meaning I didn't know how much longer. How many more Sunday dinners? How many more weeks of carrying this knowledge alone while watching Desmond trust the wrong people? How much more isolation I could survive before it broke something in me permanently? But the alternative, showing him partial truth that triggered trap I didn't understand, was worse. Better I suffer alone than Desmond lose everything because I stopped too soon. I closed the notebook and sat in darkness, staring at the empty Phase 2 folder. The affair evidence sat boxed and useless. Because I'd realized too late Tanya wasn't just betraying Desmond emotionally. The affair was cover for something worse, and finding that something meant extending investigation indefinitely, which meant extending torture indefinitely. Alvin's voice on the phone had the tone he used when cases broke wide open. Raymond, get to the office, now I found their plan, and it's worse than we thought. 2 weeks had passed since I'd boxed up the affair evidence and opened that empty Phase 2 folder. 2 weeks of searching for financial proof while isolation crushed me at every Sunday dinner. And now, Wednesday afternoon, week 7 of investigation, Alvin had found something. How bad, I asked. Bad enough that I've already contacted federal prosecutors. Don't call Desmond yet. Get here first. I drove to the FBI field office in West Loop with adrenaline overriding exhaustion. 7 weeks of surveillance. 7 weeks of carrying unbearable knowledge. 7 weeks of wondering if I'd find proof before whatever they were planning succeeded. Alvin was waiting in the conference room, laptop, open printouts, spread across the table like evidence at a trial. 3 days, he said when I walked in. I've been running financial database searches, cross-referencing business registrations, LLCs, shell companies registered to Tanya Caldwell, or Percy Holbrook, or Percy Reyes. Found it this morning. He turned the laptop toward me. Delaware Business Registry. LLC registration, dated April 15, 2024. Company name, Caldwell Capital Management, LLC. Registered agent, Tanya Caldwell. I stared at the date. April 15th. Read that again, Alvin said. April 15th. 6 months ago. 2 months before Percy moved to Lincoln Park. My chest tightened. Percy didn't move to the neighborhood until June. Exactly. Alvin pulled up more documents. They registered the company first. Then Percy created the fake identity. Then he relocated 3 streets from your son's house. This wasn't an affair that evolved into a scheme, Raymond. This was a scheme that required an affair as mechanism. I sat down hard. April 15th. They registered the company in April. Percy didn't move to our neighborhood until June. Everything calculated. Everything planned. The dinner in August where I'd first noticed the micro-tells that was 4 months into execution. By then, the LLC existed. Percy had established his fake identity, positioned himself in the neighborhood, embedded himself as the helpful financial advisor. The affair wasn't opportunity. It was infrastructure. "Look at the officers," Alvin said. I scrolled down. President Tanya Caldwell, CFO Percy Holbrook. "Been using fake identity on business registration," I said. "Look, that's federal crime number 3, Alvin said. "Identity fraud for business fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy. Prosecutors are already interested. But wait, there's more." He opened a spreadsheet. I ran financial analysis on accessible Whitaker family assets, Desmond's home equity investments, retirement accounts. He scrolled. Then I ran yours. House equity $340,000. PI company sale proceeds $220,000. Savings and investments $180,000. My hands went cold. Total family assets accessible through Desmond's marriage and your proximity, Alvin said, looking at me, $740,000. I couldn't speak. "They're not just targeting Desmond," Alvin said. "They're targeting both of you. The LLC is structured to absorb assets from 2 generations. Desmond's half through marital property claim in divorce. Your share through investment opportunity pitch. Percy was positioning himself to get you to invest in the LLC before the divorce happened. Both of you one operation. $740,000. Everything my son had. Everything I had. Everything we'd worked for. They'd planned to take all of it." "Show me the timeline," I said. Alvin pulled up a document he'd created. April LLC registered. June Percy moves to Lincoln Park under fake identity. July Percy, coincidentally, meets Desmond, establishes financial advisor relationship. August affair begins, provides divorce mechanism and emotional cover. September to October, affair continues while Percy builds trust with you, sets up investment opportunity pitch. Planned execution. November to December, Tanya files for divorce, gets half of Desmond's assets as marital property. Simultaneously, Percy convinces you to invest your assets in LLC as business opportunity. LLC absorbs $740,000, reroutes, offshore dissolves. Conspirators vanish. I stared at the timeline. 6 months of meticulous planning, fake identity, shell company, geographic positioning, relationship engineering, all of it designed to systematically destroy 2 generations of one family. "This isn't crime of passion or opportunity," Alvin said. "This is financial assassination." The scope was overwhelming. Tanya hadn't just betrayed Desmond, she'd married him, knowing she'd destroy him. The whole marriage might have been target acquisition. How long had she been planning this? Since before the wedding, since before they met. And Percy befriending me, asking about my back, suggesting that chiropractor, acting like concerned neighbor, all while planning to rob me of everything I'd built in 35 years. "If I hadn't investigated," I said slowly, "if I'd ignored that first dinner in August, if I'd dismissed the micro-tells as paranoia, they would have succeeded," Alvin said. November divorce filing, December investment pitch, January liquidation. By February, you'd both be looking at empty accounts, wondering what happened. I thought about Thomas Brennan. The way he'd looked at my evidence and called it lies. The way he'd lost everything 2 months later because he'd refused to believe until too late. If I hadn't trusted my instincts, if I hadn't opened that notebook, if I hadn't endured 7 weeks of isolation carrying knowledge I couldn't share, Desmond and I would have lost everything. "What do we need for prosecution?" I asked. "More evidence of intent. Proof they plan to execute the scheme, not just that the structure exists. Communication between them, discussing the plan, texts, emails, recordings. And we need to know their exact timeline. When are they planning to trigger this?" I looked at the LLC documents again. Caldwell Capital Management. Tanya's maiden name. Her ex-husband as CFO. Designed to absorb $740,000 from her current husband and his father. The affair was just the mechanism. The real crime was the systematic financial destruction of everyone Desmond and I were. "I need to tell him," I said. "Not yet," Alvin cautioned. "If you tell him now he confronts Tanya, they accelerate their timeline or abort and try again later. We need them to think they're succeeding. Need them to communicate about execution plans so we have prosecutable evidence." "How much longer?" "Weeks. Maybe a month. We're close, Raymond. But we can't stop now." I drove home with Alvin's analysis burning in my laptop bag. 6 months of planning, fake identity, shell company, systematic targeting of 2 generations for total theft disguised as marriage collapse. This wasn't affair that evolved into scheme. This was scheme that required affair as mechanism. Tanya had married Desmond knowing she'd destroy him. Percy had befriended me knowing he'd rob me. And I had weeks more of carrying this knowledge alone while they smiled at Sunday dinners and planned our destruction. 3 days after discovering the shell company, Alvin called, with news that changed everything. Tanya had filed for divorce, and we had 10 weeks before she took half of everything in court. I was at the FBI office reviewing LLC documents when he walked in carrying Cook County court records. The look on his face told me the timeline had just collapsed. "Oh, she filed for divorce," he said, sliding papers across the table. "October 10th, 2 weeks ago." I stared at the date. October 10th. 2 weeks ago, before we'd even found the LLC, before I knew the full scope. While I'd been documenting affair evidence and searching for financial conspiracy proof, Tanya had been building legal case against Desmond. "Filed under seal," Alvin continued. "Privacy protection grounds. But the hearing's scheduled. Property division, custody arrangements, all of it. She'd filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. That was before we even found the LLC, which meant she'd been running parallel operations. Criminal conspiracy through Percy and the LLC as primary plan. Legitimate divorce proceedings as backup if fraud somehow failed. While I'd been investigating, she'd been building legal escape route that gave her half of everything, regardless of whether criminal schemes succeeded. She was smarter than I'd given her credit for." "When's the hearing?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would be bad. "January 8th, Alvin said. 10 weeks from today." 10 weeks. I did the math automatically. 70 days, 10 Sunday dinners. Illinois law, without proof of fraud or criminal activity, presented before property hearing, standard marital asset split applied. Tanya would get half of everything acquired during marriage house equity retirement accounts investments. Desmond's business partnership stake. "How much does Desmond lose?" I asked. "She minimum $180,000 in property split," Alvin said. "Plus ongoing alimony based on income disparity, plus child support. If your investment in the LLC happens before the hearing, add your entire stake. Total family loss exactly what they planned. $740,000. Except now, they had legal deadline forcing our hand. We couldn't investigate indefinitely anymore. We had 10 weeks maximum, more realistically 6 weeks, to gather evidence allowing time for prosecutors to review and file charges before the hearing. I flipped through the divorce petition. Standard language about irreconcilable differences, equitable distribution of property, best interests of minor child. Then I saw the custody petition. Primary physical custody, I read aloud. Requesting that Aurelia reside primarily with mother, citing father's frequent business travel as indication of reduced availability for day-to-day parenting. Alvin nodded grimly. Standard divorce tactic, but effective. Desmond does travel for work, 2 to 3 days per week. Judge looks at Tanya's real estate marketing job with flexible hours and home office awards, primary custody of Aurelia. She was going after my granddaughter. Not just money, not just assets. My son's 10-year-old daughter. Tanya was willing to use Aurelia as leverage, as asset, as pawn in fraud scheme. Win custody, maintain access to child support payments, control Desmond's life through visitation restrictions. And Aurelia innocent, recording her family documentaries on iPad, showing me construction paper turkeys, would grow up living primarily with mother, who was criminal conspirator. Without criminal charges filed before hearing, Alvin said judge awards custody based on parenting time and stability. Tanya wins. Desmond loses his daughter. I set the papers down. My hands were shaking. I'm lying, I said. Walk me through what we need. Alvin pulled up calendar on his laptop. January 8th, property and custody hearing. 10 weeks out. Prosecutors need minimum 2 weeks to review evidence, draft charges, file with court. That gives us 8 weeks absolute maximum to gather everything. But realistically, 6 weeks. Thanksgiving is 4 weeks from today. That should be our evidence deadline. Give prosecutors 4 weeks to build case file charges in late December. Freeze Tanya's assets, present fraud evidence to family court judge before January hearing. 6 weeks. Our 8-week investigation plan had just become 6-week desperate scramble. We're out of time, I said. She filed divorce while we were finding the LLC. She's ahead of us. Not ahead, Alvin corrected. But she's forced the timeline. No more methodical investigation. We have to move fast now. He marked dates on calendar. Thanksgiving, November 28th, 4 weeks away. December 15th, latest evidence submission for January hearing. January 8th, property division and custody determination. Window narrowing with every passing day. What do we still need? I asked. Audio, Alvin said. We need Tanya and Percy on recording discussing the fraud. Everything else is circumstantial. LLC exists. They're having an affair. He's using fake identity. But wire fraud charges require proof of interstate communication about the scheme. We need their voices confirming conspiracy. And transfer documentation, I added. Right. Proof they moved money, or planned to move money. And evidence Percy's fake identity was used in the LLC registration. That's the identity fraud charge that makes this federal. I looked at the calendar. 4 weeks to Thanksgiving. 6 weeks maximum to prosecution-ready evidence. 10 weeks to hearing where Tanya won everything if we failed. I still haven't told Desmond, I said. He doesn't know she filed for divorce. He doesn't know about the LLC. He doesn't know Percy is her ex-husband. He doesn't know any of it. You're running out of time to tell him, Alvin said. I know. The weight of that pressed down like physical force. But if I tell him now, what does he do? Confronts her. She lawyers up, accelerates timeline or aborts and tries again later. We lose our chance at federal charges. Stika. Clocks ticking, Raymond, Alvin said quietly. 10 weeks until she wins in court. 6 weeks until we need prosecution-ready evidence. 4 weeks until Thanksgiving. We have to move now. 10 weeks, 70 days. Every single one of them mattered now. Every Sunday dinner, every phone call, every moment I stayed silent while the clock ran down. The methodical investigation had just become desperate race. 8 weeks had collapsed into 6. Every day mattered. Every choice mattered. Every moment Desmond didn't know his wife had filed for divorce was another moment that cage closed tighter around him. I left the FBI office with new timeline burning in my mind. 10 weeks until Tanya won in court. 6 weeks to build case. 4 weeks to Thanksgiving confrontation. Desmond still didn't know his wife had filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. I'd been protecting him from truth while Tanya built legal cage around him. The question wasn't whether to tell him anymore. The question was how much time we had before that cage locked shut. The FBI field office in downtown Chicago smelled like burnt coffee and stale air conditioning. I sat across from Special Agent Catherine Walsh, watching her arrange 3 case files on the metal table between us. Each folder bore a different name, but I already knew they were all the same man. Percy Reyes, Catherine said, tapping the first folder. Also known as Philip Harris Preston Hale and currently Percy Holbrook. We've been tracking him for a year. I froze. A year. The FBI had known about Percy since November 2023, 9 months before he walked into my son's life wearing that expensive suit and practiced smile. While Percy was constructing his fake identity and Tanya was registering, the LLC federal investigators were already building a case. You knew, I said. Before I even started my investigation, you knew what he was. Catherine nodded. Financial Crimes Division flagged him after the Arizona incident. But knowing someone's a con artist and proving wire fraud in federal court are 2 different things. She opened the first folder. Colorado, 2022. A widower named George Castellano had lost his wife to cancer and met a business consultant named Philip Harris through a grief support group. Harris presented an opportunity, a medical supply company acquisition that needed bridge financing. George invested $280,000 from his wife's life insurance. 6 weeks later, Philip Harris vanished along with a shell company registered in Wyoming. Same pattern in Arizona. Catherine continued sliding the second folder across. 2023. Recently divorced man named Alan Navarro. Preston Hale approached him about a real estate development deal. Navarro put in $310,000 from his divorce settlement. 8 weeks later, Preston Hale disappeared. Delaware LLC this time dissolved before anyone could trace it. I stared at the numbers. $280,000. $310,000. Not random amounts, calculated extractions based on what each victim could access quickly. Percy didn't choose targets randomly. He studied them, learned their breaking points, identified the exact moment when grief or loss or desperation made them vulnerable. And now he's going for $740,000, I said. My money and my son's? Your surveillance operation confirmed it, Catherine said. The LLC structure, the timeline, Tanya's divorce filing timed to the property hearing. It's his most ambitious scheme yet. Alvin had been right. This wasn't about Desmond's money, or my money. It was about both. 2 generations, 1 carefully orchestrated fraud. Catherine pulled out a third document. Here's our problem. Wire fraud prosecution under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343 requires proof of interstate electronic communication used to execute the scheme. Bank records show money movement, but they don't prove intent or conspiracy. We need audio evidence recordings of Percy and Tanya discussing the fraud scheme in their own words. You want me to wear a wire, I said. She didn't blink. You have something we can't manufacture: family access. You're Desmond's father. You can create a situation where Percy and Tanya feel safe enough to talk. One conversation where they explain how the money moves, how they're executing the scheme. That's what builds a federal case. I thought about Marcus's surveillance footage. Hours of meetings in parking lots and coffee shops, careful conversations in public spaces where Percy and Tanya never said anything actionable. They were too smart, too practiced. But in Desmond's living room, confronted by his father with evidence they couldn't deny, believing they still had control. When I asked, Catherine checked her phone. Property hearing is January 8th. After that, the $740,000 moves, and Percy disappears. We need to act before December if we want to coordinate properly. Set up the confrontation wire U for audio position backup units outside in case things escalate. 6 weeks. The investigation I'd been building for 2 months, all the careful documentation and surveillance, was about to collapse into a single recorded conversation. One chance to get Percy and Tanya on tape admitting to wire fraud conspiracy. What about Desmond? I said. When this goes federal, when you arrest them, he's going to know I was part of it. Catherine's expression didn't change. Your son is already a victim, Raymond, whether he knows it or not. Our job is to stop this before the money moves, and he loses everything his grandfather built. She was right, but that didn't make it easier. I thought about the notebook argument, the way Desmond had looked at me like I was violating his privacy by trying to protect him. How would he look at me when FBI agents arrested his wife in their living room while I stood there wearing a recording device? Colorado and Arizona victims, I said. What happened to them? Catherine closed the folders. George Castellano lost his house 8 months after his wife died. Couldn't keep up mortgage payments without the insurance money. Alan Navarro declared bankruptcy. Both men filed police reports, but local jurisdictions couldn't track Percy across state lines. That's why this is federal now. Interstate wire fraud falls under our jurisdiction. I imagined Desmond's face in those files. Another folder, another victim, another family destroyed by the man who'd smiled at me across the dinner table and called me sir. I'll do it, I said. Catherine pulled out a business card. I'll coordinate with Alvin on the technical setup. We need to stage the confrontation carefully, make it feel organic, like you discovered something that forced your hand. Percy needs to believe he can still manipulate the situation. She stood gathering the case files. One more thing. Once we move, this goes fast. Federal arrest warrant, asset freezing, media coverage. Your family situation becomes a matter of public record. Make sure you're ready for that. I watched her leave, thinking about the 3 folders on that table. 3 names, 3 schemes, 3 families destroyed. And now mine about to become either the 4th victim or the case that finally stopped him. I just had to stage a confrontation, record my family's destruction, and hope the FBI could build a prosecution before Percy disappeared again. Simple. Except nothing about this was simple anymore. I came home from the FBI field office needing something that reminded me why family mattered, before it became evidence logs and surveillance reports. Helen's anniversary was next week. 4 years since I'd lost her. Every year I found the same photo, Helen at Aurelia's first birthday in 2014, holding our granddaughter with that smile that meant everything was right. I opened the family cloud account on my laptop. Desmond and I shared it, years of photos organized by date. I scrolled toward 2014, the annual ritual of grief and memory. Then I saw a folder I didn't recognize. Aurelia's iPad auto-upload, created 3 months ago. Desmond must have set up automatic backup for her device. I clicked it, curious. Hundreds of videos. Thumbnails showed her bedroom homework assignments, online class recordings. Her documentary habit digitally preserved and automatically uploaded to family storage. I scrolled through titles. Math homework, September 23rd. Science Project October 2nd. Book Report October 9th. Then I saw October 15th. Online math class October 15th. 3 weeks ago, during my surveillance period. I clicked it without thinking grandfather curiosity about what she recorded. The video opened. Aurelia's iPad screen showed a math worksheet, her teacher explaining geometry over video call. Standard remote learning. But the iPad was propped on her desk, and through the doorway behind it, I could see the living room. Timestamp 0047. Tanya walked into frame in the background. Timestamp 0052. Percy followed. Aurelia's voice narrated, "So if angle A is 90 degrees, then angle B has to be." She was focused on homework, oblivious. Timestamp 0103. Tanya and Percy kissed. 12 seconds. Clear faces, unmistakable. October 15th, the day Desmond traveled to Pittsburgh. Tanya and Percy in my son's house thinking they were alone except for a 10-year-old doing homework 12 feet away. And Aurelia had captured it all. I replayed the video 3 times. The evidence was perfect. Timestamp proved the date. Faces clearly visible, no misidentification possible. The kiss was intimate, deliberate, destroying any business associate's claim. Metadata showed automatic upload from Aurelia's device at 8:47 p.m. minutes after homework ended. The FBI would accept this. Catherine Walsh could use it in federal court. Visual proof of the affair accidentally captured but admissible. Better than surveillance photos from coffee shop windows. Better than GPS logs. One 12-second video closing the documentation gap completely. 8 weeks of surveillance parking lot stakeouts, hiring Marcus tracking movements across Chicago, and the evidence had been sitting in my family cloud for 3 weeks. 87 seconds of footage containing 12 seconds of perfect proof. Before I explain what using that video would really mean for Aurelia, comment A, if I should use this evidence, or B, if I should protect my granddaughter, and add one short reason why in 5 to 10 words. A quick note, what follows includes fictionalized details to convey the emotional weight of this choice. The lesson is what matters most. I sat back understanding what I was looking at. If I gave this to the FBI, Aurelia became the witness. Not intentionally, she had no idea she'd recorded her mother's betrayal. But in federal court, when prosecutors played this video for the jury, when defense attorneys cross-examined the evidence chain, when journalists covered the case, Aurelia would know. Her iPad, her homework recording, her innocence weaponized, 10 years old. She'd been doing math problems while her mother destroyed her family 12 feet away. She hadn't meant to document anything. The auto-upload was Desmond's backup protection. But if I used this, Aurelia would spend her life knowing she exposed her mother. Not because she was suspicious or trying to catch anyone. Because she'd been a good student doing homework while her iPad passively recorded the background. The trauma was predictable. Defense attorneys would ask, "This came from your granddaughter's device. Did she know she was recording? Was she positioned to deliberately capture this?" Even if Aurelia never testified, even if her name stayed sealed, she would know. Her classmates would eventually know. The 10-year-old who accidentally sent her mother to federal prison. That knowledge would follow her forever. Every time she picked up a recording device. Every time someone mentioned her mother's case. Every time she wondered if she could have done something different. I'd seen it in my PI years, child witnesses, in custody cases, abuse investigations, fraud prosecutions. The guilt they carried wasn't logical. They'd done nothing wrong. But logic didn't matter when you were the person whose evidence destroyed your family. Aurelia didn't deserve that. She'd done nothing except exist in her own house working on homework, while adults around her made catastrophic choices. I had everything I needed in 12 seconds of video. Perfect evidence solving every documentation problem. and I was about to delete it to protect a 10-year-old's innocence. I moved the cursor to the file, right-clicked, selected Delete from Cloud. Confirmation dialog. Delete permanently from all devices. One click, and the FBI's easiest evidence disappeared. One click, and I committed to the harder path. Thanksgiving confrontation FBI wire, forcing Tanya and Percy to confess on audio, risking everything on one conversation that might fail. I clicked delete. The video vanished. 3 weeks of backup storage erased. Perfect evidence gone. I opened FBI case notes and typed, Thanksgiving sting operation required. Audio confession from subjects. No shortcuts available. The easy path had been right there. Show the video close, documentation, give Catherine Walsh everything she needed. Instead, confrontation with recording device engineering, a situation where Percy and Tanya felt safe explaining their fraud scheme, capturing conspiracy on FBI audio. The hard way. The dangerous way. The only way that let my granddaughter stay innocent. I closed the laptop and sat in darkness thinking about Helen. What would she say about deleting evidence to protect Aurelia? Probably something about grandfathers making sacrifices grandchildren never know about. Better I carry the burden of a difficult investigation than Aurelia carry the burden of destroying her mother. Now I just had to plan the trap with Alvin and figure out how to make Thanksgiving dinner the setting for a federal wire fraud sting. 3 hours after I deleted the video, I was still staring at my closed laptop like it might resurrect what I'd erased. The math was brutal. Video evidence 100% conviction rate in wire fraud cases with electronic proof. Live sting operations 60% success rate when the target is sophisticated. I was the client who'd just chosen the 60%. I opened the laptop again, checked the trash folder. Empty, secure deletion. The video was gone. Tanya and Percy kissing at timestamp 0103 on October 15th, while Aurelia did homework 12 feet away. Perfect evidence. Erased. If I'd kept it, the FBI could have arrested Percy within 48 hours. Divorce court would have awarded everything to Desmond. Case closed. Instead, I'd committed to a Thanksgiving sting with single point of failure. Tanya had to confess on audio while the FBI listened. If she stayed silent, if Percy didn't show, if the wire malfunctioned, every failure landed on one conversation. And I'd deleted the evidence that would have made it unnecessary. Having perfect evidence made the choice harder, not easier. Because now I knew exactly what I'd sacrificed. The video hadn't just proved the affair, it was timestamped during Aurelia's online class, showed Tanya's office background with papers on the desk, captured audio of Percy discussing account transfers. Case-closing evidence that would have made the FBI's job effortless. Deleting it meant accepting responsibility for every risk that followed. I walked to the bookshelf and picked up Aurelia's photo from last Christmas. Reindeer sweater, gap-toothed smile. The frame felt cold. The decision was already made. Aurelia's innocence wasn't negotiable. I'd already settled that in the cloud storage window cursor hovering over delete. No point relitigating it now. I put the photo back and pulled the Thomas Brennan file from my desk. 2021. Thomas hired me because his wife, Margaret, was acting suspicious. I investigated for 4 weeks, built a complete picture bank, records, transfer receipts, $340,000 of documented theft. I spread every document on his desk, bank records, transfer receipts, $340,000 of proof. He looked at it and called it fabricated. Walked out. Stopped returning my calls. 3 weeks later, the accounts were empty. $480,000 gone. Thomas filed for divorce, thinking I was paranoid. When he learned I'd been right, he never spoke to me again. Blamed me for knowing and not stopping it. I realized I'd been standing in the dark apartment for 40 minutes. Rain heavy against the windows, now city lights doubled by water on glass. Two versions of the same view. Like two versions of the same choice, use video, protect Aurelia. I couldn't have both. The Brennan case taught me you can't save someone by being vague. Desmond wouldn't believe, I think Tanya's stealing. He'd defend her, cut me out, wake up in February with empty accounts. I needed audio. Tanya's voice saying the numbers, Percy's name, the plan. That was the only way Desmond would believe, and the only way the FBI could arrest. I sat down and pulled out a legal pad. Started drafting conversation strategy for Thanksgiving. 7 questions designed to sound like concerned father-in-law while extracting confession. How's the new financial advisor working out would trigger LLC discussion. Desmond mentioned Percy's investment advice. Do I know him? Established conspiracy. What's the total asset plan? Extracted dollar amounts. Catherine Walsh's words echoed. We need her saying 3 things on tape: Percy's name, the dollar amount, and the LLC. Miss one element, the arrest doesn't stick. 3 pieces of audio. 1 Thanksgiving dinner. 0 backup plans. I listed every failure point. Tanya suspicious. Percy absent. Desmond interrupts. Aurelia overhears. Wire malfunctions. FBI timing off. I push too early. Tanya deflects. 12 variables, single point of failure. If Thanksgiving failed, Tanya proceeded to the January 8th hearing. Got the house custody, everything. Percy disappeared with the money. FBI had no case. Desmond lost $740,000 and his daughter. I lost my son's trust forever. 4 months of investigation, meaningless without that audio confession. And I'd chosen this risk to protect a 10-year-old's innocence. Then I remembered Helen's last words. 4 years ago, hospital room 2 days before she died. She squeezed my hand. Don't let the job make you forget people aren't cases. She worried I'd investigate my way out of human connection, solve problems by gathering evidence instead of caring about damage. Ironic. Now I was choosing human connection over investigative certainty, protecting Aurelia instead of guaranteeing justice. I opened my investigation journal and wrote, November 4th, 2024, deleted video evidence, committed to Thanksgiving wire operation, single point of failure risk accepted, rationale Aurelia's innocence non-negotiable. I underlined non-negotiable twice. Professional investigators hedge bets. They don't delete perfect evidence for moral reasons. But I'd stopped being just an investigator when this became about my family. Now I was a grandfather, choosing which risk felt like living with myself, certainty of hurting Aurelia or risk of total failure. I'd take the failure risk. Some things mattered more than winning. I checked the laptop time, 11:47 p.m. In 7 hours, I'd call Alvin to finalize sting logistics. No turning back after that. I pulled out my phone and typed, need to meet tomorrow morning. Have to finalize Thanksgiving approach. Also need to tell you why I erased the best evidence we had. I stared at that last sentence for 30 seconds. Once I hit send, once Alvin knew I'd deleted the video, the operation became real, became witnessed, became a commitment I couldn't back away from. I hit send. 3 dots appeared immediately. Alvin was awake. His reply, my office 7 a.m. Bring your question list. I also sent a quick text to Marcus Drummond, operation moving to FBI direct. Your work is done clean, exit send final invoice. He replied in under a minute. Understood. Evidence chain intact. Good luck. That was the last I heard from him. 7 hours until I turned a moral choice into a tactical plan. 7 hours until choosing the hard way became irreversible. Alvin read my text message 3 times before looking up, with an expression I'd seen on bomb squad faces, careful respect, for someone handling live explosives. You deleted case-closing evidence to protect your granddaughter from testifying against her mother. He said it like testing whether the words sounded insane out loud. Yeah, I said. And now we get one shot at Thanksgiving or we get nothing. Alvin poured 2 coffees in his office 7 a.m. on November 5th. Ray, I've known you 30 years. This is either the stupidest thing you've ever done or the most human. He handed me a mug. Probably both. So we're gambling $740,000 Desmond's marriage and 4 months of work on a single dinner conversation. Alvin looked at me. You sure about this? I wasn't. Completely. He sat back quiet. Then, my daughter testified in a custody case when she was 12. Her mother's boyfriend was abusive. Caroline told the truth, helped convict him. She's 27 now. He paused. Still has nightmares. Therapy twice a month for 15 years. I hadn't known that. So, yeah, Alvin said. I understand why you deleted that video. Some things you don't make kids carry. 2 hours later, we sat in a conference room at the FBI Chicago field office. Catherine Walsh spread wiretap authorization forms across the table. Illinois is single-party consent state, she said. You're a party to the conversation you can record legally. We just need homeowner permission. That's Desmond. We'll brief him Thanksgiving morning. And if he refuses, I asked, then we have no legal standing, and the operation ends. Catherine's tone was matter-of-fact. But given what we're preventing, I doubt he'll refuse. She pulled out a diagram of Desmond's kitchen. Wire fraud statute needs 3 elements on audio interstate communication scheme to defraud specific dollar amounts. Get Tanya saying Percy's name, the LLC, and numbers over 100,000. That gives us federal arrest authority. Equipment, Alvin asked. Omnidirectional mic in the kitchen lamp. Raymond wears a backup body wire. Catherine marked the diagram. Agents stage 1 block away. Raymond says the trigger phrase, we're inside in 90 seconds. We'll also position Alvin inside the house the night before enters during the pre-Thanksgiving grocery run, stays out of sight in the kitchen hallway. Secondary containment if either subject attempts to flee before breach. Trigger phrase, I asked. Catherine looked at me directly. 4 words for the record. Work it into conversation naturally after you have audio confession. We breach immediately. She tapped the table. But don't say it unless you have the goods. Once we enter, there's no takebacks. What if I can't get her to confess? Her face was stone. Then you eat Thanksgiving dinner, we pack up, and January 8th she takes everything in property court. 1 shot, no replays. Planning a Thanksgiving sting felt like writing a play where the audience is armed, the actors don't know they're performing, and the curtain call is an arrest warrant. The phrase gives you control. Catherine continued. If it's going bad, if Aurelia's getting traumatized, if you can't do this, don't say it. We'll never know. But once you say those 4 words, 20 agents hit that house in under 2 minutes. The weight settled. 4 words between family dinner and federal raid. Walk me through failure scenarios, I said. Percy doesn't show. Catherine answered her own question. Then we have half a conspiracy and no interstate fraud proof. We need both of them on audio. Alvin leaned forward. What if Tanya doesn't talk, deflects every question? Then Raymond has dinner with his family and we have no case. Catherine said. That's the risk. Wire malfunction, I asked. We used 2 systems, lamp mic and body wire. Odds of both failing less than 1%. Odds of you not getting confession much higher. Technology isn't the variable, you are. I pulled out my question list, 7 sentences drafted at midnight. Catherine read through them. Don't ask yes or no questions. Open-ended only. Not, are you working with Percy, but how long have you and Percy been planning the LLC structure? Assumes facts, forces details. Alvin circled question 4. This one. What's the total liquidation target? Sounds like investigator speak. Try, how much are you two looking to clear once everything's liquidated? Same intel, casual curiosity. Catherine added margin notes. Remember, you're not interrogating a suspect. You're a father-in-law who figured out the truth and wants to hear it directly. Hurt, disappointed, not aggressive. That's how people confess when they think explaining will fix it. I looked at my question list, 7 innocent sentences designed to destroy my daughter-in-law's freedom, and felt the weight of what I'd become, a grandfather weaponizing turkey dinner. Start neutral, escalate gradually, Catherine instructed. Make Tanya think she's won before revealing you know everything. That's when she'll justify it, and justification is confession. We spent another hour refining the questions, which got dollar amounts, which extracted LLC details, which forced Percy's role into the open. By the end, my 7 questions hit every legal requirement Catherine needed. Timeline, Catherine said. Thanksgiving is November 28th, 23 days. We install the lamp mic November 27th while your family shops. You get fitted for body wire November 26th. Desmond gets briefed. Thanksgiving morning at 8 a.m., 1 hour before guests arrive. No communication with Tanya or Percy until then, Alvin asked. Normal family contact only, Catherine confirmed. Nothing suggesting investigation. Raymond, you're still the grandfather who showed up at that first dinner. The meeting ended at 11. Catherine stood and extended her hand. 23 days, Ray. Memorize those questions until they sound like you, not a script. On Thanksgiving, you're not an investigator, you're a grandfather protecting his family. Walking to the parking lot, Alvin asked, You really think you can sit across from Tanya, smile past the stuffing, and interrogate her into confessing? I unlocked my car. No. But I'm going to anyway. He drove off. I sat in the driver's seat holding my refined question list. 23 days marked on the calendar. The operation was locked wire in the lamp agents 1 block away, trigger phrase memorized, no backup plan. One conversation determined everything. Desmond's assets, Aurelia's future. 4 months of investigation, and only I could say the 4 words that made it real. The trigger phrase gave me absolute power. I controlled when the FBI entered, could abort mid-conversation if protecting Aurelia required it. But it also meant total responsibility for success or failure rested on my performance alone. 4 words, for the record. 23 days until I had to decide whether to say them. I started the car thinking about Helen. She used to say Thanksgiving was about gratitude. This year it would be about betrayal with a side of cranberry sauce. The body wire itched against my ribs as I stood on Desmond's porch at 8 a.m. Thanksgiving morning, rehearsing how to tell my son I was about to destroy his marriage before the turkey was carved. He answered on the second knock, still in pajamas. You're early. We need to talk before anyone else arrives. I stepped inside. Kitchen. Desmond followed, confused. I closed the door and pulled out the folder, surveillance photos, LLC documents, Percy's identity records. Tanya filed for divorce 6 weeks ago. You don't know because she's hiding it until the property hearing in January. By then, she and her ex-husband Percy plan to liquidate everything you own. I watched my son's face collapse. He sat down hard at the kitchen table. Percy Holbrook is her ex-husband. The guy helping with our finances is her ex. His voice cracked. They're stealing from us. To Delaware LLC registered in April. They're targeting your assets and mine, $740,000 total. I spread the documents. FBI is listening today. I'm wearing a wire. If I get Tanya to confess on audio, agents arrest them both during dessert. If I don't, she takes everything in 6 weeks. Desmond stared at the photos. Tanya entering Percy's building on North Dayton Wednesday, Friday, Monday. Timestamps, durations, patterns. 37 documented visits while he traveled for work. I need you to trust me and act normal for the next 8 hours, I said. He looked up, eyes red. Aurelia's going to see her mother arrested at Thanksgiving. His hands shook. How is that protecting her? I met his eyes. Because the alternative is, she watches you lose custody in January and wonders why Grandpa didn't stop it when he could. Desmond stood, walked to the window, stared at nothing. I knew something was wrong. The way she looked at her phone, the new clothes, the late meetings. He turned back. I thought I was paranoid. Turns out I wasn't paranoid enough. The entry twist hit me. He'd been carrying suspicion alone while I'd been gathering proof. Both of us circling the same truth from different angles. Can you do this? I asked. Sit through dinner, smile at her pass. The potatoes pretend everything's normal while your father interrogates your wife into confessing. Desmond wiped his eyes. Do I have a choice? You always have a choice. He stood straighter. Then I choose to save what's mine. 2 hours later, Tanya arrived with grocery bags, kissed Desmond, oblivious to the morning's revelation. Happy Thanksgiving, Dad. She hugged me, handed me pie. Thanks for coming early. Desmond's been weird all morning. Can you cheer him up? I smiled over her shoulder at my son. I'll do my best. Aurelia bounded in, wearing a construction paper pilgrim hat from school. Grandpa. She hugged me hard. I felt the wire press against my chest, FBI listening to every word. I made you a place card, you're sitting next to me. She showed me a turkey she'd colored. I hugged my granddaughter while wearing a federal wire, FBI listening to her tell me about construction paper turkeys, and realized some betrayals require you to betray yourself first. Wouldn't want to sit anywhere else, sweetheart. The kitchen filled with cooking smells, rosemary, sage, roasting turkey. Tanya hummed while stirring gravy, the picture of domestic contentment. Oh, I invited Percy Holbrook, you know, our financial advisor. He's alone for the holiday. Hope that's okay. Desmond's jaw tightened. I kept my voice light. Of course. More the merrier. By 11:30, the dining table was set for 6. The lamp with the hidden microphone sat as centerpiece, innocent and deadly. I adjusted it slightly. This centerpiece is perfect, Tanya. Really brings light to the conversation. My earpiece crackled confirmation that lamp mic was live 5x5 signal strength. Desmond helped Tanya cook with robotic precision, watching her with new eyes. She tasted stuffing, adjusted seasoning, smiled at some private thought. What are you thinking about? He asked quietly. She turned, kissed his cheek. How lucky I am. The lie was so smooth I almost believed it. Aurelia set the table, folding napkins into swans she'd learned on YouTube. When's Mr. Percy coming? He's nice. He helped Mommy with computer stuff last week. My chest tightened. Soon, honey, very soon. The doorbell rang at noon sharp. Percy arrived with expensive wine, kissed Tanya's cheek, half-second too long, shook my hand with the confident grip of a man who thought he was winning. Brought your favorite Pinot. He handed the bottle to Tanya, hand lingering on hers. Figured we're celebrating. Celebrating what exactly? Her divorce filing, the LLC reaching target numbers. Or just the fact he thought he was untouchable. Raymond, good to see you again. Percy's handshake was firm, eye contact steady. This was a man who'd stolen from people before, walked away clean. Desmond's told me you're a retired private investigator. Must have great stories. I smiled. 1 or 2. How do you carve a turkey when your hands are shaking from the wire taped to your ribs and the knowledge that dessert comes with handcuffs? Percy sat across from me, Tanya beside him, Desmond at the head of table, Aurelia between me and Tanya. Perfect positioning. I could see both conspirators. FBI could hear everything, and my granddaughter was close enough to protect if conversation went bad. The trap was set. Let's say grace, Tanya suggested. Aurelia asked Grandpa. Grandpa, will you say grace? Aurelia's hand squeezed mine. I looked around the table. Desmond, who'd just learned of betrayal. Tanya conspiring to destroy him. Percy, her accomplice, smiling. Aurelia, innocent. The next 2 hours determined everything. Let's be grateful for family, for truth that comes to light, and for the courage to face what needs facing. Amen. Percy raised his wine glass. To new beginnings. Tanya clinked hers against his smile, intimate. Desmond lifted his glass with mechanical precision. I touched mine to Aurelia's cider. To truth, I said quietly. My earpiece crackled. All units positioned. Audio clear. Green light for operation. Your show, Raymond. I reached for the stuffing and started passing dishes. Percy leaned back in his chair, relaxed, confident. Instead of a nervous target, he was a predator at ease, no fear to exploit, no anxiety to leverage. He thought he controlled this table, thought his charm and Tanya's planning had already won. That confidence would make extracting confession harder. But it also meant he'd talk freely, thinking he was safe. So, Percy, I said, keeping my tone conversational, as I passed him mashed potatoes. Tanya mentioned you've been helping with financial planning. How's that going? He smiled across the table at me, and I began the longest conversation of my life. Percy answered my financial planning question with practiced ease. Going great, actually. Tanya's been very organized about documentation. His tone was casual, but the first suspicious gesture happened during the stuffing pass. Tanya's hand met his for exactly 2 seconds longer than necessary, fingers curling together, while Aurelia asked about the parade on TV. 2 seconds, I counted. Wait, I was Squanto in the school play. Aurelia waved her fork excitedly. Mrs. Henderson said I had the best corn prop. Tanya smiled at her daughter. You were wonderful, honey. Normal mother-daughter moment. Except the FBI was recording it as preamble to federal wire fraud arrest. Percy raised his glass. This is what Thanksgiving should be: family, good food, people you trust around the table. The irony was so thick, I could taste it alongside the cranberry sauce. Desmond passed gravy with shaking hands. More potatoes, Dad. His eyes met mine's silent question about when this nightmare would begin. I shook my head slightly. Not yet. Not while Aurelia's here. I cataloged behavioral evidence while eating. Percy mentioned timing the portfolio transition while looking at Tanya. She responded, early January works perfectly. Then caught Desmond's confused look. For tax purposes, she added quickly. Percy's been advising on year-end strategy. The lie was seamless. They'd rehearsed this. Second eye contact happened over the turkey platter, lasting exactly 2 seconds. I counted again. Tanya's slight smile, Percy's micro nod. Communication at a frequency only they understood. 30 years of investigations taught me people who coordinate that precisely have practiced extensively. When Tanya reached for the wine bottle, Percy lifted it simultaneously, synchronized movement of people who know each other's rhythms intimately. Desmond saw it too. His fork stopped halfway to his mouth before he forced himself to keep eating. Their body language mirrored each other. Synchronized sips. Identical fork angles. Unconscious couple tells that decades of marriage usually produce, except these two had been divorced since 2016 and reunited for fraud in 2024. They'd rehearsed this entire dinner scenario, anticipated questions, prepared responses, coordinated their performance down to the micro gestures. That made them more dangerous than I'd expected, and more likely to walk confidently into confession. I'm making a video diary for social studies, Aurelia explained between bites. Recording family stuff already have 43 videos. My chest tightened, remembering the October 15th footage I deleted forever. Tanya's face flickered. Did she know what her daughter had accidentally captured? "Mr. Percy, do you have kids?" Aurelia asked. He smiled smoothly. "Not yet. But I love kids. Your mom talks about you constantly." The familiarity in his tone, "your mom," suggested hours of intimate conversation. Desmond's jaw clenched. I watched my granddaughter describe her video diary project while wearing a federal wire to record her mother's confession, and wondered if protecting innocence always requires this much betrayal. Aurelia showed Percy her construction paper turkey. "This feather is for being thankful for family." Percy examined it seriously. "Family is everything. The people you trust most." He looked at Tanya. I felt Desmond's fury radiating beside me. Percy shifted into financial territory, testing waters. Desmond, the Delaware structure. Tanya and I discussed timelines still tracking for Q1 transition, right? His tone was casual, but his eyes watched for reaction. Desmond froze. I jumped in smoothly. "Delaware's tax efficient. Smart planning. Gave Percy rope to hang himself." Tanya added, "The house equity piece restructures beautifully with the business sale proceeds and savings consolidation. We're looking at $740,000 total optimization." She just confessed the exact target number on an FBI wire while thinking she was discussing legitimate planning. My earpiece crackled confirmation that the Bureau captured it. Percy warmed to the subject, confidence building. "Beneficial ownership through LLC provides flexibility, especially when primary account holders don't need to know operational details until execution." He just described conspiracy to defraud on federal recording. "Execution timeframe." I asked, keeping tone curious rather than confrontational. "Jito post-holiday," Percy said. "Clean transition into new year." Tanya's divorce filing times perfectly, with asset restructuring. Very elegant planning. Desmond's hand gripped his fork until knuckles went white. He stopped eating, staring at Tanya with mixture of heartbreak and rage. She touched his arm. "Honey, eat. Turkey's getting cold." He didn't move. I kicked his shin hard under the table. His eyes snapped to mine. I shook my head fractionally. Desmond's voice came out strangled. "You're discussing restructuring my company sale proceeds and house equity with him." Tanya squeezed his hand. "Honey, Percy's our advisor. This is normal financial planning. Why are you being weird, gaslighting in real time?" Desmond stood abruptly. "Need water." He walked to the kitchen stiffly. Tanya watched him go, concerned. "Is he okay?" I smiled. "Turkey makes him sleepy. You know, Desmond, how do you watch your son listen to his wife discuss stealing his life savings with technical precision and ask him to smile, eat turkey, and wait 5 more minutes for his daughter to leave the room?" In the kitchen, I heard Desmond breathing hard, steadying himself against the counter. Percy leaned toward Tanya, whispered something. She nodded. First crack in their confidence, Desmond's reaction had registered as potential problem. Desmond returned with forced smile. "Sorry, low blood sugar." He sat down, gripped his water glass like a drowning man holding a life preserver. Percy watched him with slight suspicion. "You feeling all right, Desmond? You seem tense." "Fine," Desmond said. "Just a long week." Aurelia finished her last bite of sweet potato casserole. "Mommy, can I watch the dog show in the living room?" Tanya kissed her forehead. "Of course, baby. Take your cider." Aurelia skipped away, iPad in hand, oblivious that she'd just left the interrogation room. Living room TV sounds filtered through dog show announcer Aurelia's happy commentary to herself. Sound of innocence at safe distance. Percy refilled wine glasses. "Now we can talk adult stuff." The exit twist hit me. He'd wanted Aurelia gone too. They'd planned to have private conversation with us, possibly to gauge suspicion level or reveal part of their plan. They were about to walk into interrogation thinking they controlled the narrative. 4 adults remained at the table. Raymond wearing wire. Desmond ready to explode. Tanya and Percy confident they'd smoothly discussed conspiracy disguised as financial planning. The moment had arrived. No more waiting. No more subtle observation. No more protection of innocence. Trigger phrase 4 words away. I straightened. Let the investigator take over 30 years of interrogations, hundreds of confessions extracted, every technique perfected. My voice dropped lower, shifted register from grandfather to interrogator. Percy, I've been wanting to ask you something about your background. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the manila folder I'd carried for 8 weeks. Placed it on the table between the cranberry sauce and my daughter-in-law's lies, and watched Tanya's face realize Thanksgiving was over. I removed 3 items methodically. First, my spiral PI notebook opened to the first page. August 15th, 2024. First dinner observation. Subject exhibits intimate familiarity with family financial advisor. Investigate further. Second, identity documents. Showing birth name Percy Reyes, Denver, address marriage certificate to Tanya Caldwell, dated March 2014, divorce decree, January 2016. Third, Delaware LLC registration for Caldwell Capital Management, filed April 12, 2024, listing Tanya Whitaker and Percy Reyes as officers with my handwritten annotations, showing asset targets totaling $740,000. Each document landed with the sound of a door closing. Percy stared at his real name on the marriage certificate. Tanya's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips, frozen. Desmond looked at the documents, then at his wife, then at Percy. Percy Reyes. His voice cracked. You were married to him. 8 weeks, I said quietly. 3 surveillance operations, 47 photographs, 2 private investigators, 1 FBI interstate fraud investigation, and 1 Thanksgiving dinner where you tell the truth on record. The silence that followed felt like falling. From the living room, Aurelia's voice drifted through. That poodle's so fluffy, dog show audio continuing innocence at safe distance while adult lives collapsed at the table. Percy's hand twitched toward his car keys on the counter. His confident facade crumbled. I should go, he said. I shook my head. FBI's 1 block away. You leave this table, you're arrested in the driveway. Stay. Talk. This is the only conversation that determines whether you see a lawyer tonight or a jail cell. Tanya picked up the LLC documents with shaking hands. Her face cycled through shock, calculation, fury. Then she asked the question that told me everything. How long have you known? Not denial. Not, this is a misunderstanding. Not even, I can explain. Just how long was I watching before she noticed professional fraudster mindset, calculating damage, not caught spouse proclaiming innocence? Long enough, I said. Answer my questions and maybe FBI goes easy. Lie and agents enter in 90 seconds. Desmond's voice was hollow. You were married to him. You brought your ex-husband into our house, our finances, our daughter's life, and you were planning. He couldn't finish. Tanya met his eyes. Desmond, let me explain. Then explain, he said. On record. For everyone listening. I shifted into interrogation mode, each question designed to extract specific elements the FBI needed. Tanya, did you register Caldwell Capital Management, LLC in Delaware on April 12, 2024, listing Percy Reyes as CFO? Silence. Answer yes or no for the recording. Her eyes widened, recording. The reality settled. Yes, she whispered. First confession captured. Percy Reyes, that is your legal name, correct? And you were married to Tanya from 2014 to 2016 in Denver, Colorado. Percy's jaw clenched. You're recording this. Yes. Answer the question. Long pause. That's correct. Second confession. FBI had interstate conspiracy now. What's the total liquidation target house equity business sale proceeds? Savings combined value you plan to transfer to the LLC. Tanya calculated whether lying mattered anymore. Won $740,000, she said flatly. Give or take. She said it like discussing grocery budget, not admitting conspiracy to defraud her husband and father-in-law of their entire net worth on federal recording at Thanksgiving dinner. There it was. Dollar amount, conspiracy acknowledgement, interstate scheme, everything the FBI needed on audio. Catherine Walsh would have enough for wire fraud charges, asset seizure, federal prosecution. Tanya's face shifted from caught to calculating. I watched her mind work through the implications. You're wearing a wire, she said suddenly. Right now. That's why you're asking yes or no questions, forcing verbal confirmations mentioning dollar amounts. She looked at my chest. FBI's listening. This whole dinner was a setup. I didn't deny it. The answer was always going to come out. Question was how. How long? She demanded. How long have you been recording me in my house with my daughter present, wiretapping your own family like we're criminals? Percy touched her arm, warning to stop talking. She shook him off. No, he wants truth. Let's talk about truth. Desmond leaned forward. You stole from me. You planned to take our daughter, my house, everything Dad built, everything I earned, and you're angry that he investigated. Tanya turned on him. I'm angry your father spied on his family for 2 months and turned Thanksgiving into an FBI ambush. That's who he is. That's who he's always been. She was pivoting, cornered predator turning to attack. This is what you do, Raymond. Her voice shook with manufactured hurt. You spy, you invade privacy. You can't trust people, so you follow them, record them, treat everyone like suspects. Your own family. I made mistakes, but you turned our home into a surveillance operation. What kind of person does that? The kind who stops fraud, I said. No. She stood now, voice rising. Desmond, your father has been stalking me for 8 weeks. Photographing me, tracking my movements, recording conversations, hiring other investigators to follow me. This is the man who raised you. The man who taught you family means suspicion. Love means investigation. Trust means verify. She was good, almost believed it herself. You know what this is called? Invasion of privacy. Harassment. Probably illegal wiretapping. You might have evidence, Raymond, but you got it by becoming the thing you always were, a man who can't stop prying into other people's lives, even when those people are your son's wife, your granddaughter's mother. Tanya looked directly at me and said, You couldn't help yourself. And she was right. I couldn't stop investigating even when investigation meant wiretapping my son's wife at family dinner. But that's the real crime here, she continued. You couldn't help yourself. You never can. You pried into Desmond's life when he was a teenager, and now you're doing it to his wife. You chose your profession over your family again. That's what you always do. The shame weapon landed. I felt it, because she was partially right. I had surveilled my family. I had turned Thanksgiving into an FBI sting. I had chosen investigation over trust, evidence over relationship. Desmond looked at me, and I saw the question in his eyes. Did protecting us require destroying trust this way? The trigger phrase was 4 words away. For the record, would bring 20 agents through that door in 90 seconds, end this with arrests, validate every choice I'd made. But Tanya had just reframed me as the villain. And those 4 words felt suddenly much harder to say. Tanya turned from me to Desmond with tears in her eyes, real or performed, I couldn't tell anymore, and said the words designed to make him choose her over evidence. Your father is sick, and he's trying to destroy our family, because he can't help himself. She reached for Desmond's hand across the table. Desmond. I made mistakes. Maybe I got too close to Percy. Maybe the LLC structure was wrong, but your father turned our marriage into a surveillance operation. He followed me, photographed me, recorded me, for 8 weeks. Is that love, or is that the man who couldn't stop investigating you when you were 16? Percy leaned forward, reinforcing. Think about it, Desmond. Your father wiretapped Thanksgiving dinner, with your daughter in the next room. What kind of person does that to family? Whatever we did wrong, we're not the ones who violated every boundary that makes a family trust each other. Tanya's voice broke. I love you. I know I hurt you. But please don't let your father's obsession destroy what we built. He won't stop. He never stops. That's who he is, an investigator who sees everyone as suspects, even the people who love you. She squeezed his hand. Even me. The shame weapon was fully deployed. Everything rested on Desmond's choice. Desmond stood slowly, pushed his chair back. Didn't speak. Long silence. He looked at Tanya, at Percy, at the evidence spread across the table, at me. Tanya's face showed hope. She thought she'd won. I thought she had too. 30 seconds passed. Longest of my life. FBI listening through the wire, waiting. From the living room, Aurelia laughed at something on the dog show, normal childhood sound backdrop for family implosion. 8 weeks, Desmond said finally. Just those 2 words. Pause. Dad watched you for 8 weeks. Another pause. Tanya nodded eagerly. Yes. Invasive, wrong, sick. Desmond's face was unreadable. Then he turned to Tanya with devastating calm. When 8 weeks means you knew he was watching. I didn't know about the affair. But I knew something was wrong with those LLC papers you had me sign in September, signature pages, without full contract, rushed explanations. His voice stayed eerily steady. I've been waiting for Dad to tell me what it was. Tanya's face collapsed. Desmond, I can explain. He held up his hand. You had me sign papers giving someone access to the house equity. The business precedes the savings. $740,000. Dad just confirmed the numbers? You were going to take everything, including Aurelia, and disappear to Delaware with your ex-husband, while I wondered what happened. Desmond turned to me. I didn't want to believe it, but I trusted you'd only investigate if something was really wrong. You taught me that investigators don't waste time on innocent people. So I waited, and you were right. My son said, I trusted you'd only investigate if something was really wrong. And 30 years of being called invasive, paranoid, obsessive collapsed into 8 words of vindication I didn't know I needed. He looked at Tanya. He was right about everything, wasn't he? She didn't answer. I looked at Tanya and Percy, at the evidence on the table, at my son standing beside me. The moment had arrived. Confession recorded. Son's trust secured. Evidence complete. I said 4 words I'd been carrying for 3 weeks. For the record, my voice steady, clear, final. Tanya's face went white. No. No, you didn't. She understood. Entire dinner was a sting. Confession recorded. FBI listening. She looked at the lamp at my chest where the wire pressed against my ribs. You recorded everything. The whole dinner. The confessions. Everything. Not a question, realization. Percy pushed back from the table fast. I'm leaving. He stood. I shook my head. 90 seconds. They're already moving. Distant sound of vehicles approaching, barely audible, but there. Percy heard it too, froze. You had this planned from the beginning. The questions, the evidence, the dinner, all of it was FBI operation. I nodded. All of it. 87 seconds after I said the trigger phrase, heavy pounding on the front door. FBI federal warrant. Catherine Walsh's voice through the wood. Percy bolted toward the kitchen, but Alvin stepped from the shadows, blocking the exit. I hadn't seen him positioned there. FBI had agents inside the house before the trigger phrase, adding a layer of protection I'd never mentioned. "Sit down, Percy," Alvin said quietly. "It's over." 6 agents flooded through the front door, weapons holstered but present. Catherine Walsh entered, first badge raised. "Tanya Whitaker, Percy Reyes, you're under arrest for wire fraud conspiracy to commit fraud and interstate racketeering." Miranda writes at Thanksgiving table. "You have the right to remain silent," words designed for interrogation rooms now spoken over cold turkey and conspiracy evidence while the dog show played in the next room. Another agent applied handcuffs. Tanya stared at the table. "At Thanksgiving. You arrested me at Thanksgiving dinner with my daughter in the next room. I met her eyes. She's safe. That's what matters." Through the living room door, I saw an agent kneeling beside Aurelia, keeping her attention on the TV, blocking her view of her handcuffed mother being led out. "Let's watch this part, honey. The big dog is about to win." Aurelia's voice. "Why is it loud out there?" The agent smiled. "Just some adults talking. Watch the show." Tanya and Percy were led out through separate doors to different vehicles. Standard procedure: keep conspirators apart. Prevent communication, preserve evidence integrity. Desmond stood at the window, watching police cars leave, Tanya in one, Percy in another. "She's really gone," he said, voice hollow. I stood beside him. "You'll get custody. FBI has everything. She won't see Aurelia unsupervised again." Long silence. "I don't know if that makes this better or worse." I didn't have an answer for that. Alvin touched my shoulder. "Clean operation, Ray. Recording solid confession, dollar amounts, conspiracy acknowledgement. Federal prosecutors going to love this." I peeled the body wire off my chest, handed it to him. 8 weeks for 90 seconds of arrest," I said. He smiled grimly. "That's the job. Slow investigation, fast justice." I looked at the Thanksgiving table, cold food manila folder, handcuff indentations on the chair arms where Tanya had sat. Evidence of a holiday that would never be forgotten. "Some holidays you remember forever," Alvin said. "This is one of those." From the living room, Aurelia called out, "Grandpa, when's dessert?" I looked at Desmond. He looked at me. Neither of us knew how to answer, because the hardest part wasn't catching the criminals, or extracting the confession, or coordinating the arrest. The hardest part was walking into that living room and figuring out what to tell a 10-year-old about why mommy wasn't coming back to the table. 3 days after I arrested my daughter-in-law at Thanksgiving dinner, I sat in an FBI conference room, learning she'd face 12 years in federal prison, and felt nothing resembling victory. Catherine Walsh spread case files across the table. Alvin sat beside me, notepad open but untouched. Wire fraud under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343, conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, federal charges across 3 states, Catherine said. "Your Thanksgiving recording gave us everything: verbal admission of scheme, dollar amounts, interstate LLC structure, fake identity confirmation. Prosecutors are calling it the cleanest fraud case they've seen in 5 years." I nodded mechanically. Clean case. Textbook investigation. Words that should have felt like achievement. Tanya Whitaker and Percy Reyes were arraigned this morning, December 1st. Both held without bail. Delaware accounts prove flight risk. Multi-state pattern shows sophistication. They're not getting out until trial. Alvin leaned forward. Sentencing projections. Catherine pulled out another document. Federal wire fraud carries 20-year maximum. With conspiracy enhancements and multi-state pattern guidelines, put Tanya at 8 to 12 years as mastermind, Percy at 6 to 10 as accomplice with priors. They're both looking at significant time, 8 to 12 years. Tanya's the architect. Prosecutorial consensus, Catherine continued. She recruited Percy, created the Delaware LLC using her maiden name, Caldwell engineered Desmond's trust for account access, planned the January property hearing to extract custody and assets simultaneously. Fraud amount over 500,000 triggers enhanced sentencing. 8 years, minimum 12, likely with conspiracy charges. She showed me a sentencing worksheet with numbers that looked clinical until I did the math. Federal time means 85% served no parole, no early release. Catherine's voice stayed professional. Aurelia's 10 now. If Tanya gets 10 years at 85% service rate, she's inside for 8.5 years minimum. Her daughter will be 18-19 when she's released. Aurelia grows up without her mother. Misses middle school, high school graduation, college move-in. All the moments Tanya won't see because she chose money over being present for her daughter's childhood. That's not justice, I said. That's just loss. Catherine nodded. Yeah, but it's lawful loss. There's a difference. She pulled out more files. Percy Reyes has a pattern dating back 5 years. Colorado, 280,000 stolen from 3 women 2017 through 2018. Arizona, 310,000 from 2 victims 2019 through 2020. Same playbook every time. Romance financial advisor cover LLC structures disappears when accounts empty. 7 victims total before Tanya, 7 women. Catherine showed me photos of Percy's prior victims, women in their 30s and 40s, professionals smiling in the pictures, taken before they lost everything. Each one trusted him. Each one thought they were special. I realized Desmond wasn't special. He was just next in line, which somehow made protecting him feel both more necessary and more impersonal. He's sophisticated patient, builds trust over months, Catherine said. Your Thanksgiving audio is the first time we've had him on recording admitting to a scheme. That confession closes cases in 3 states. Colorado and Arizona prosecutors are thrilled. Alvin looked at the photos. He's serial. This wasn't about Tanya. She was just another Mark who happened to have a convenient ex-husband willing to partner up. But that wasn't quite right either. The entry twist hit me as I looked at the files. No, I said. Tanya wasn't a victim he recruited. She was a potential victim who chose to become an accomplice instead. Percy approached her the same way he approached the others' romance financial advice access to money. But Tanya recognized the pattern because she'd been married to him. She knew what he was. And instead of walking away, she offered him a bigger target, Desmond and me. She weaponized their prior marriage instead of being victimized by it. Catherine nodded slowly. That's why she's facing longer sentencing. She had knowledge and chose conspiracy. That's worse than being deceived. But we stopped him, Alvin said. Your investigation stopped number 8. We stopped him. I repeated, wanting the words to feel like something other than hollow. Catherine pulled out financial documents. Delaware authorities froze Caldwell Capital Management LLC accounts November 29th, day after arrest. Recovered $180,000 already transferred from preliminary transactions. Prevents them accessing funds from jail. She continued through the asset protection results. House remains in Desmond's name, divorce filing invalidated due to fraud. Company sale proceeds, secured savings accounts frozen pending criminal restitution. All targeted assets protected. Your son keeps everything. The divorce filing, I asked. Dismissed with prejudice. Can't proceed with divorce. You filed under fraudulent pretenses to hide asset theft. Tanya doesn't get custody hearing, doesn't get property settlement, doesn't get anything. Desmond files for divorce now if he wants, but he controls the timeline and terms. Alvin leaned back, looking at me. So, your 8-week investigation saved $740,000, prevented custody loss, stopped a serial fraudster, closed multi-state cases, and delivered 2 federal arrests with guaranteed convictions. By any investigative metric, this is a perfect case. He paused. So why do you look like you lost? The question hung in the air. Desmond hasn't called me since the arrest, I said finally. 3 days, no calls, no texts. Aurelia cries every night asking when mommy's coming home, and Desmond has to explain federal prison to a 10-year-old because of evidence I collected. What's the value of saving someone's financial future if the method destroys your relationship with them? Is $740,000 worth a son who won't return your calls? I saved the money and lost my son's trust. I continued. That doesn't feel like victory. Alvin was quiet for a moment. You think Thomas Brennan wishes you'd been more invasive in 2021? You think he'd trade privacy for the $480,000 his wife stole while you backed off to be polite? Justice isn't comfortable, Ray. It's just necessary. You chose necessary over comfortable. That's the job. Catherine added. 8 years from now, Desmond will have raised his daughter, kept his assets, built a new life. Tanya won't have destroyed him. That's because you wore a wire to Thanksgiving dinner and made the hard choice. He'll understand eventually. They always do. I nodded, wanting to believe her. And if he doesn't, Alvin met my eyes. Then you saved him anyway. That's what fathers do. The words reframed everything. I stopped being an investigator months ago and became a father protecting his son from a distance only surveillance allows, which Desmond may never forgive. But Alvin was right. That's what fathers do. 4 days after Thanksgiving, my son knocked on my apartment door at 9 p.m., and I opened it expecting anger, but found something worse in his eyes, the need to understand why I'd watched his wife destroy him for 8 weeks without saying a word. 4 days I've been trying to figure out what to say to you, Desmond said. 4 days of Aurelia asking why mommy's in jail, why grandpa put her there, why Thanksgiving ended with police. And the only thing I keep coming back to is, why didn't you tell me sooner? He wasn't angry, he was exhausted. I let him in, poured coffee neither of us would drink. You want to know why I investigated for 8 weeks instead of warning you after week 1? He nodded. Why the silence? Because I was terrified of losing you. The entry twist settled between us. He'd come not to confront me about surveillance being wrong, but to understand why isolation had been necessary. He'd already processed the betrayal. Now he needed to comprehend the burden. Tell me everything, he said. Week 1, I had suspicions, no proof. If I'd said, I think Tanya's cheating, what would you have done? Desmond was quiet. Defended her. Told you to stop being paranoid. Maybe cut you off. I nodded. Exactly. She'd have known I was watching, covered her tracks, accelerated the timeline. You'd have chosen her over my suspicions, and by January, you'd have lost everything while resenting me for trying to warn you. But every week I wanted to tell you. I continued. Week 3, when I confirmed Percy was her ex-husband. Week 5, when I found the LLC. Week 7, when FBI confirmed the divorce filing. Every week I picked up the phone and stopped because I was terrified you'd choose her over my evidence. My voice cracked. So I carried it alone. 8 weeks watching you trust the woman destroying you. 8 weeks of surveillance photos, notebook entries, sleepless nights wondering if I was doing the right thing. 8 weeks of choosing between saving you and losing you. I chose saving you. Even if it meant you'd hate me for it. I told my son I'd spent 8 weeks choosing between saving him and losing him, and watched him realize the weight I'd carried alone was heavier than the betrayal his wife had planned. You watched me for 8 weeks, Desmond said slowly. But you also carried it for 8 weeks alone. For 2 months you knew my wife was destroying me, and you couldn't say anything because saying it wrong would make it worse. His voice was quiet. That's not invasion. That's isolation. The recognition in his eyes shifted something between us. I spent 20 years resenting your profession, he continued. The surveillance, the suspicion, the way you looked at my friends like suspects. But those 8 weeks you used every bit of that training to protect me. You investigated my wife with the same precision you used on strangers. And you did it alone, because that was the only way to guarantee I'd believe you when you finally spoke. He wiped his eyes. You could have walked away. Instead, you spent 8 weeks watching my life unravel, gathering evidence I'd believe, building a case I couldn't deny. You sacrificed our relationship to save my future. That's what fathers do, right? The hard thing, even when it costs them everything. I couldn't speak, just nodded. Can I see the notebook? He asked. I handed it over. He flipped through pages. August 15th, first observation, September surveillance confirmations, October LLC discovery, November FBI coordination. Then the final page, November 28th. He read it twice. You thought I'd choose her over you. You went into Thanksgiving dinner thinking you'd lose me. I wrote that entry at midnight before Thanksgiving, I said. FBI operation locked wire-fitted questions memorized. And I was terrified you'd hear the evidence and side with her. That I'd sacrifice the relationship and save nothing. I was prepared to lose you to protect you. Desmond closed the notebook carefully. This line, some protections require becoming the villain. You knew I might see you as the bad guy. The invasive father who destroyed my marriage instead of the investigator who saved my assets. And you did it anyway. He read my November 28th notebook entry. Some protections require becoming the villain, and understood I'd been willing to be hated to keep him whole, which is what love looks like when it wears surveillance equipment. You were willing to be my villain to keep from being my failure, he said. He set the notebook down, stood, walked to me. First embrace in 20 years, since he was a teenager, embarrassed by his father's profession. We stood there, my son crying not for his wife's betrayal, but for my 8 weeks of isolation. I'm sorry, he said, for 20 years of being ashamed, for making you feel like your work was something to hide. I was ashamed of your work my whole life. His voice muffled against my shoulder. The surveillance, the investigations, the way you saw through people. I thought it made you cold. Turns out it was the only thing that could save me. Your profession, the one I resented, was exactly what I needed. I'm sorry I made you do it alone. We pulled back. Son Aurelia still needs help, Desmond said. She cries every night. Asks why mommy can't come home if it's her fault. The legal part is over, but the healing part just started. I don't know how to help her. I met his eyes. We'll figure it out. Together this time. No more isolation, no more carrying it alone. We help her understand why her mother's gone, and how we keep going anyway. He nodded. Together. The reconciliation was complete, but the exit twist was the acknowledgement that Aurelia's healing would take years, not weeks. Justice had been delivered, assets saved, conspirators imprisoned, but a 10-year-old's questions about why Grandpa's love required Mommy's arrest couldn't be answered in a single conversation. Some victories require generations to fully win. Some protections require becoming the villain, and some burdens carried alone in silence become the foundation for understanding that arrives years later. But we'd carry the next ones together. 6 months after I arrested my daughter-in-law at Thanksgiving dinner, I was eating scrambled eggs alone at Lou Mitchell's diner when my phone vibrated with a text that made me believe in second chances. The coffee was hot. The newspaper folded beside my plate. June sunlight through the window, Chicago waking up outside. Saturday morning at a West Loop diner, routine that felt earned instead of lonely. The waitress refilled my cup. Usual Saturday spot, Ray. Your clockwork. I smiled. Retirement means I can be predictable. Thought you'd be bored by now. I looked out the window. Turns out peace is pretty good after you've earned it. 6 months since Thanksgiving. Tanya got 10 years, federal. Percy got 8. Assets recovered, custody secured, Desmond rebuilding as single father, and me eating eggs with no wire under my shirt, no surveillance planned, no secrets to carry. The investigation notebook sat on my shelf at home now next to Helen's photo. Closed case. Every Sunday, Desmond invited me to dinner. Every Sunday, I went. My phone buzzed. Text from Desmond, photo attached. Aurelia holding a piano recital certificate, gap-toothed smile, looking like her old self. 11 years old now, and surviving. The text read, "First recital since everything." She played Beethoven, cried after, but happy tears. Therapy's working. She asked if you're coming to Sunday dinner, said she wants to show you the trophy. 6 p.m. I stared at the photo. Therapy's working. 3 words meaning 6 months of weekly sessions, gentle explanations about why mommy made bad choices, age-appropriate conversations about fraud and consequences. Aurelia was processing it. Not over it wouldn't be for years, but processing. That's all healing ever is, managing pain slowly enough not to drown. And she wanted to show me the trophy. Not avoiding Grandpa who arrested Mommy. Wanting to share an achievement. That's what forgiveness looks like in an 11-year-old piano trophies offered without blame. The entry twist settled warm. My granddaughter had healed enough to want me present, showing resilience I'd hoped for, but couldn't guarantee. I thought about the notebook on my shelf. My 8-week investigation journal. Desmond had taken it from FBI evidence returns, had it professionally leather-bound, added a brass inscription plate. Dad's last notebook. Thank you for seeing what no one else could. Love, Desmond. He'd turned evidence into heirloom, transforming surveillance record into family testament. Same notebook, different meaning, which is exactly what healing does to memory. Every page documented suspicion, observation, fear, isolation, now preserved as artifact of protection. My son had bound the proof of my profession and placed it next to his mother's photo. For 20 years, Desmond was ashamed of my work. Now he'd inscribed it with gratitude. That's what reconciliation looks like. The thing that divided you becomes the thing that saved you, shame transformed into honor. My profession, seeing what others missed, protecting before damage happened, redeemed by being exactly what my son needed when his life was being stolen. I sipped coffee, watched June sunlight through the window. The job was never about peeking into people's lives. It was about seeing ahead. Noticing the micro behaviors, the timeline inconsistencies, the LLC papers that didn't add up. Understanding those details meant someone I loved had a chance to choose differently. Surveillance isn't invasion when it prevents destruction. Carrying burden alone isn't isolation when it protects outcome. Being villain temporarily is acceptable when alternative is being failure permanently. For 8 weeks I was the father who spied on his son's wife. Now I'm the grandfather Aurelia shows piano trophies to. The profession didn't change. The context did. Helen told me before she died, "Don't let the job make you forget people aren't cases." She was right. But sometimes treating people like cases, gathering evidence, documenting timelines, forcing verbal confirmations on federal wire is the only way to save them. I didn't investigate Tanya because I saw her as a case. I investigated her because I saw Desmond as a son worth saving. I picked up my phone and typed, "I'll be there. Tell Aurelia I can't wait to hear about Beethoven and see that trophy. Proud of her. See you both at 6. Hit send without hesitation. No analysis of whether I should go, whether my presence would complicate things, whether Aurelia really wanted me there. Just, I'll be there." I texted back, "I'll be there," without hesitation, and realized the real resolution wasn't arrests or sentencing. It was the moment Sunday dinner stopped requiring courage and started requiring only showing up. Simple acceptance. 6 months ago, I'd sat at a different table watching my son's wife betray him, wondering if investigation would destroy our relationship. Today, I was confirming Sunday dinner plans without a second thought. That's what healing looks like. The invitation isn't questioned. The acceptance isn't agonized. The dinner just happens because family happens. I finished coffee left. Tip walked out into June sunshine. The exit twist was the hook loop itself. The story had opened with me hesitating about investigating that first dinner observation, uncertain about involvement. Now it closed with me accepting Sunday dinner invitations without hesitation, eager for connection. Full circle, from uncertain observer to secure participant. The coffee was hot. The diner was familiar. My son invited me to dinner. And now, every Sunday, my son invites me to dinner. I no longer have to think about whether to go. I just go. That's how you know the case is really closed. Not when arrests happen or sentences get handed down, but when Sunday dinner stops being reconciliation attempt and starts being just Sunday dinner. Peace earned through pain. Family rebuilt through sacrifice. Profession redeemed through love. I walked toward my car phone in my pocket, June's sun warm on my face, thinking about Aurelia's piano trophy waiting at 6 o'clock. Some protections require becoming the villain. Some burdens must be carried alone. Some investigations destroy relationships to save them. But this one ended with Sunday dinner and piano recitals, and a text message that said my granddaughter wanted me there. That's close enough to victory for me, and to you listening to my story. Remember this, sometimes protecting the people you love means making choices they won't understand right away. I spent 8 weeks carrying the truth alone, watching my son trust the woman destroying him. I questioned every decision. I wondered if surveillance was invasion or protection. I feared Desmond would hate me forever for wearing that FBI wire to Thanksgiving dinner. Looking back, I'd do it all again. But I'd also remember that saving someone sometimes means accepting they'll resent how you saved them. Here's what I learned from family revenge stories like mine. Trust your instincts, even when everyone else tells you you're paranoid. Professional expertise doesn't disappear just because it's your family. The signs of betrayal are the same whether you're investigating a stranger or your daughter-in-law. And sometimes the hardest protection is the kind nobody thanks you for until years later. I believe God put me through those 8 weeks of isolation for a reason to teach me that love isn't always comfortable. And being a father means carrying burdens your children never see. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below. Have you ever had to protect someone who didn't want your help? What would you have done in my situation? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more family revenge stories about protecting the people you love, subscribe to Dad's Revenge Stories. Your support means everything. Thank you for staying until the very end. This story contains fictionalized elements for storytelling purposes, but the lessons about family protection and sacrifice are real. Remember, sometimes being the villain temporarily is the only way to be the hero permanently.